Yeah, as we were sort of saying beforehand, is that I love writing. I love the creative process of writing. But I'd love to know, like, how your writing process creatively has improved your sort of, made you a better chef and a better cook. Do those two create... One of the things I love is when two sort of things collide.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think when disciplines are woven together, I think that's
I really believe
interesting.
that, yeah.
And as a kid, I loved writing, and I devoured books as a kid. I mean, I literally just went... and if it wasn't a puffin, it was a penguin, and then moved into, hardbacks. That was all that. That wasn't very grown up when I read my first hardback. Kind of hilarious. Years later, I said to my dad, why didn't you buy us all first editions? I went, look at the state of your stuff. I mean, you'd have destroyed them. As if any mint edition of a first edition would ever survive your childhood. And at school, I loved writing. It was one of the few subjects I really engaged with. But without any intention or plan or anything, and which is much like cooking. So I kept reading, and somehow, amazingly, I found myself in kitchens where I was encouraged. We all used our names, which is, at the time, I didn't think anything of, but in hindsight, was really pretty extraordinary, considering it was the late 70s and going into the 80s.
Right.
And I loved nothing more than on a day. I've found one of the great things with working in a kitchen is you get days off in the middle of the week. So I used to get something like, like a Tuesday night, a Wednesday and a Thursday morning off. And so I would have 2 mornings where I was in bed with a tray of tea, devouring books. And over time would scribble things. And I think my writing professionally, if you can use such a term, was the gift of Matthew Fort when he was the food editor of The Guardian newspaper when it was still a broadsheet.
Right.
Which was dated magnificently. And Rowley Lee had been the columnist, and he had been lured to the Telegraph. One day I just got a bolt out of the blue, this call from Matthew, saying, would you like to... I thought it was a joke first. I was like, because I just went to the Sun and he went, hello, are you there? And I went, uh-huh. And I went, is this a joke? I said, I haven't put pen to paper since. I mean, I write menus, not recipes and columns. I went, well, actually, I do. And so it came to be. And I lucked out. I got the last cookery column in a broadsheet, give or take, I think. Or was it Heston? I can't remember. Anyway, it was a long time ago. So I started, and it was completely ad hoc. I mean, it was literally, you started to put your pen to the top of the page, and you just out it comes. And it flowed quite naturally. And Matthew was really interesting because he never sent copy back for me to look at or edit. It just went straight in.
Really?
Just write.
Yeah.
Which destroyed me for future life. Because I went, what do you mean you're sending this back? Something you'd work on for 6 months and it would come back that afternoon. Edit. And I was like, so cruel, how harsh, And so it began. My first little baby steps into it were really an astonishing
What's your specific process? Is it morning with coffee? Is it late at night?
Oh, God. Never made a plan.
Never made a plan?
Never got it there. I would like to go to bed at 3 a.m. and get up at 5.
Yes.
And having felt like I've slept for 24 hours.
Yes.
I mean, and I can't do that. So it was ad hoc, to say the least. And what I did for the book cooking that was because of that COVID spring, that amazing spring. And when we were, stuck at home alone, I mean, I went to bed with the sun going down and rose with the sun appearing again the next morning.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I really enjoyed those mornings. And the only question was this going to be a 3-pot of tea morning or a 4? But how much tea can you get done? And I can drink a lot of tea. I do love it. And so, and that's it all began. And bit by bit, I began to work out what recipes were, how they worked. I loathed and was able to nix, because I never really worked with it. The browning and sweating and all these horrible cooking terms. And I just went, that's just not cooking for me. They're sort of strange, they're going, that's cooks do, So down in the kitchen here, I mean, it's all, it's like, what did you say? And they're like, nothing. I said, did you just use the G word?
What is it? Sorry, caffeine's on.
Oh, thank you, darling.
Caffeine's en route.
Oh, angel, blessed be. Oh God, that sounds like Handmaid's Tale, doesn't it? Oh, blessed day. Don't say that. love the Elizabeth Moss.
Yeah, so what sort of book? You said you were a voracious reader as a kid. Like, what sort of stuff were you...
Oh, Puffins, like there was no time. Mummins, I was mad for. Tolkien, I was mad for. C.S. Lewis, all the Narnia books. Green No books. Lord, I mean, Enid Blyton.
Yeah.
Magnificent 573, you name it, whatever number, no, whatever the abacus had, I would read it.
Yeah.
And then, all sorts of stuff. Mum was brilliant. She really enjoyed, because she was always let off on a Saturday morning. And sometimes she would take me into town so she could, because she worked. So Dad took the kids for a Saturday. And I often went into town with Mum, so she would take me to, there's a wonderful bookshop just in Dundee. Anyway, all ancient history now, they're all gone, sadly. But we could go there, and I was allowed to buy, a puffin or two, and so I was given a book a week. And there were great libraries back then, and my grandmother had great books in the house. The home itself was stowed out with books.
Yeah.
So they featured often. They were a great part of. Mum and Dad were very good about that. They just put stuff in our way. And so you almost really had to trip over it. And then you go, oh, what's that? And they would be amused and pleased if you just went. Oh,
and would you? Because I think the way we're taught to read at school is kind of wrong, which is like from cover to cover. I think the way I read is I'll pick something up. It's actually the more books you fuck off, the better, because it's like if this isn't doing it for me, on to the next. But it's
oh gosh, I know it's a real wonder.
That's a bit of an art, I think.
An electronic age has taught us that.
Yeah.
Because I was brought up with, if you started it, you finished it.
Really interesting.
Like you ate everything on the plate. You know, that was a mantra. And we had no trouble finishing what was on the plate because it was always delicious. So Mum was a great cook, and Dad too. One of the bits and bobs he did, but with reading it was but I think when you're younger you're voracious and your mind is just so hungry for knowledge and imbued with curiosity that it just drinks it up. And it's amazing. I can remember all sorts of stuff from back then. My short-term memory now is shot to Hades. But back then it was amazing. And as I find, as I've got older, I have to say, if a book doesn't, if it's just not working and my mind is not on it and I'm distracted. But I do have to read with a mobile phone and a laptop a mile away.
Yes.
Can't have them in the same room.
Yes.
They have to be like that. And instantly, I can't read on a screen.
Yeah, neither.
It's terrible. I've got to hold the book. And so there's piles of books all over the place. Some are read, some are started, some are an ongoing project.
Well, I think it can be like, what is it? Right book, wrong time. I think it can
Yes.
I think that's a really.
But timing, lighting, and mood.
Yeah.
For sure.
Like it can be like, I'm trying to think of a book like I read. I love Tom Wolfe, who did Bonfire of Vanities and Electric Kool-Aid and the Acid Test. First time I tried to read that, I was like, this is beyond me. And then 4 years later, I think there's something about that, and there's a book. And
yes, I was like that with Bonfire of the Vanities. I didn't get it. When it first came out, I was like, and everyone was going bananas about it.
Yeah.
With me, I just did not gel.
Yeah.
And then years later, I don't know, was I probably at someone's house, because I can never pack the book I want to read. And whenever I get to, if I'm staying with friends or something else, I'll go away and I go, oh God, why did I bring this? And it's, because the one minute you're in Hackney, the one minute you might be in Dorset or Wiltshire or in Scotland or wherever. And blessedly, just rather spoiled to have the friends who've got bookshelves groaning. And so I'm pretty sure a lot of books, certainly in the latter part of my years on this lovely planet of ours, were picked from shelves from friends.
Yes.
Because we were awful like minds, we usually liked the same things. It wouldn't be surprising that a book they liked, I would like. And I'm pretty sure Tom Wolfe fell into that as well.
Yeah.
I reckon.
He was an amazing writer. And I don't know who it was who says a book's portable magic. I really love that.
Couldn't agree more.
And especially when you actually read it physically, especially with today's world, you're so it's so discombobulating how just the technology. Even I notice it with doing this, right? It's like technology the whole time.
Oh
And
God!
books
I mean,
like
it's so. And also remember to bring a charger. I mean, imagine being on a train and your phone dies. I mean, it all goes, and you haven't got a book.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I know that is a woeful situation. That's going to do nothing for anyone. Travel always with a book, I see.
Out of all the books you've read, like what protagonist do you think did you best relate to when you were sort of starting out? I think because you started working in Dundee, then you came down to London. Like
exactly.
at that part of your career, because I feel like the great protagonists are the ones that you sort of really relate to.
Got it. Well, I think it's interesting because I think nowadays it's very interesting because up until very recently, what I thought were classics and masterpieces and thought nothing of it and what have you. And now returning to be like, well, it's all about male, all this. Where are the women? And one of the great things in writing is that the field is so expansive. There are no borders and it goes in every direction imaginable. That's one of the great joys of books, generally. And I think growing up, I loved Daring Do. I was such a geek, honestly.
Daring Do?
I loved Daring Do. So I loved the Scarlet Pimpernel, John Buchan books, Dawnford Yates, Tweeds, oh golly gee, they're coming, boo boo, into the rolls, Jones, and don't spare the horses. All that, but I just adored all that. It was absolute twaddle and great, gorgeous and wonderful writing. With a few, dodgy issues going on in there as well. But you move on very quickly with that. And will I ever read them again? The 39 Steps is a great book.
What's that about?
The 39 Steps is brilliant. It is, protagonist is a man called Richard Hannay. No, sorry. Going back, Richard Hannay is, God, am I getting all confused now? Who is in which one? John Buchan's hero, boom, start that all over again. John Buchan's hero in 39 Steps is a man returned to London who gets embroiled in espionage.
Right.
And then suddenly gets into all sorts of carryings on, and with each step taken, it becomes more complex. And it was made into a brilliant film by Alfred Hitchcock with the wonderful Robert Donat, who did introduce a woman, bizarrely, into it that doesn't appear in the book. And then suddenly you're crossing the Forth Road Bridge on the Flying Scotsman, and then suddenly you're in the Highlands, and with these terribly dubious characters, and they're all up to no good. And desperate to bring down the government and unspeakable things. But anyway, spoiler alert, give no more away. Have a read, it's great fun. Excellent holiday gear.
Yeah, and how did you relate? Was that the book you related to the protagonist as you found yourself?
Hugely. I thought, oh God, yeah, because I was this weird, gawky, really overweight, nerd of a teenager. I mean, I didn't fit in at school. And I certainly didn't rebel or do anything like that one because I literally left school and then found myself in the kitchen. So harking back, it's really peculiar, but it somehow worked and somehow I vanished into kitchens. It was literally exit school and it was shutters down, and not till years later. And my great companions, because I was working every weekend and nights and what have you, and wasn't a great social person then at all. And I was living at home. We were living in the country, so access to. And there were a couple of families in Dundee we were close to. But so, like many in a similar situation, books were a godsend. I didn't think anything of it. I didn't feel shortchanged or anything like that. In fact, quite the opposite.
Were books like your friends, would you say?
Yes. Oh God, you could step and like films. You could step into every kind of realm imaginable. I devoured Dune with as much gusto as I did the Lord of the Rings.
The book Dune.
Oh, God, we were all Dune nuts.
Yeah, because that's the bit.
You couldn't get.
Yeah, because I read that like last year, and it was like it's the whole thing's like, is it prescience, like that ability to kind of like look into the future, like that. There's something in that, like.
Yeah,
when you can apply stuff from fiction to real. I think all the life lessons are hidden in fiction.
It's all this mad 50s AI on YouTube now, with these folk are trying to get it into the, trying into Forbidden Planet. We're like, wow, this is really off the charts.
Yeah,
it's extraordinary.
It's it's mad how like I think there are so many like lessons buried deep in fiction. When you said you vanished into kitchens out of school. Like, describe the first day in a kitchen. How did that sort of transform you? Because you're now this super gregarious, bubbly character. Like, I can't really imagine
no, we were very cowed.
Really?
My first job.
Yes.
I'd
So
never
describe
worked
the first
before.
day.
Yeah, but first of all, I'd been a waiter. It was a very lovely Edinburgh couple. The Bells had bought this very beautiful house just down the road from where we lived in Ochta House, just outside Dundee on the east coast of Scotland. And it was a very beautiful, old Scots manor house that belonged to all the great families. Had crazy, fantastic plasterwork and wonderful, amazing. You know, that's a fireplace you could have roasted a bull in. It was extraordinary. But very sweet. It was small. It wasn't some gargantuan rambling palace, you know, which you can often get in Scotland. And so it was a neat size. And there were three. There were Norrie, the head chef, Billy, the sous chef, Mark, who was the junior sous or something, I suppose you would call it, or senior chef de partie. Grace, who was the commie, and so I became her whipping boy. It was quite funny. Between the slow women in kitchens, let me tell you, it was very different when I was growing up. And they were super. They as a waiter, it was all right. I was kind of okay, but I really wasn't very good. My heart wasn't in it at all, and I wasn't very good. I mean, I was always ending up with ratatouille and red cabbage down my front. I'm saying, who would put red cabbage and ratatouille together in a dish and result, you know?
Yeah.
Mum, they do different food to you as man, but Mum was just like, just wash my hands of the whole sordid affair. It was very funny. And so very sweetly, instead of sacking me, they put me in the kitchen. And so one morning, and literally, I came down with a floor-to-ceiling apron on and big white kerchief and a big hat. I mean, crazy. And, you know, the 4 beautiful jackets we had back then.
What did the jackets look like?
Really proper, classic, thick white cotton. And it's a terrible sadness you can't buy those anymore. They're really brilliant. The last place that I saw them on the backs of waiters at St. John. They still somehow managed to get those. But I have a funny feeling.
Why did they sort of like dissipate into the ether like those?
I don't know. I think there was. I think it's when I think the boom, because it was so classic, that look, you know, and it did belong to a very ancien classic regime, going way back, and predating even Escoffier. But it was based on very sensible premises, you know, all white. You changed it twice a day. Any stain that showed up, so you could never use the same article twice. So you were always, you know, back. I mean, hygiene was all, you know, and we were very conscious of it. And food and so was all washed hands. So we were always immaculately turned out. And then over time, I think when I came to London, it was still the same. But I did notice, probably around about the 90s, I think, when suddenly all the jazzy trousers started coming in. It was like, oh yeah, here we go. What's all this thing? Is that going to make you a good cook wearing jazzy pants? And it was all quite funny. And we were quite snooty about it. Probably still are. Well, and we don't have anything like that downstairs here. I said, no.
No jazzy trousers.
No, and I mean, I don't even like short sleeve jackets. I think they're terrible as well. But I mean, that's mum's the word on that one.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd probably take out half the industry in that or something.
Why don't you like short sleeve jackets?
Because I'm you know, a geek from way back, and I liked. I mean, I do roll up my cuffs occasionally. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But there's, you know, but I also worry about all this exposed flesh.
Sure.
And you're in hot pans and fat spitting around and what have you. I really know. And we've all got these outrageous scars from ovens and pans and things, you know, our honourably won battle scars. So I think thick white cotton is very, very good. But I would imagine, you know, and then if you see a white cotton, I mean, there's the very famous, who makes the big posh French jackets? But I mean, the price of them now, I mean, mention they're Egyptian cotton. I mean, it's like buying from Turnbull and Asser. You know, I mean, the cotton's just unbelievable. But I mean, it's how much? Okay, well, you're on your own there. You know, I need to get myself 1,000 stars before I can even look at a cuff on one of those shirts. So it's very funny, and I think I just fell into it, and then. To this day, I've got no idea what on earth it was. And really, I put it down to the fact that Norrie, Billy and Mark were that. I didn't have to address them by their titles. And Grace as well, obviously. We were just cooks in the kitchen. Obviously, there's a hierarchy and a structure. But they took this gawky kid under their wing. And I wasn't beaten up. It wasn't John Brown school days. It wasn't easy. And I certainly did 5 doubles a week. I mean, that was pretty mental. this weird notion that if you're in the country, you have no life, so you can just work all the time. You know? Where did that come from? You know, I've just had a huge. I've just come from school. We had months off. You know, now I've got minutes off. I don't understand. You know, so it was a very odd transition. And I think, looking back, I'm going to say it. I am grateful to this day that I got to serve an apprenticeship. And it was knuckle down, head down, and get on with it, because that was the only way through. And I liked learning. I really enjoyed it. I liked learning. I liked, you know, I loved the transition from a section that was total carnage and always up to my neck and up to my eyeballs and always chasing my tail. To suddenly, I don't know, you don't know what it is, but one day suddenly the containers are ordered and labelled and it's all fresh, and you know, and suddenly you're doing it, suddenly you're swimming. And that was amazing.
Suddenly you're swimming, that's such a beautiful way of putting it. How did you transform from like the Jeremy that went into that kitchen, and then when you came out, like what happened?
Oh God, well, I think that was the boys again, because I swear to God, it's true. I woke up and I was nudging 21. And I'd gone in the kitchen at, God, must be 17, 18, something like that. So I'd done a good couple of years. So basically the length of a college education, let's say, if you're doing a course. And Norrie took me out and I was like, oh God, what have we done now? Oh God. And I went, I never get, you know, I'm usually praised these days. And he said, listen, what's the plan? What are you going to do? And I went, and really, I hadn't thought. I mean, because all our generation fell into this. We didn't make plans. Certainly didn't have a 5-year plan. You know, Stalin. I mean, who? And he said, right, okay, enough. I've arranged an interview with our old alma mater, who's no longer cooking at the Station Hotel in Perth, which was just up the road from Dundee, but is at Boodles on 28 St James's Street, London SW1, and you're getting a train down there on Friday for an interview. Sent to London for an interview that lasted 20 minutes.
What did they ask you in the interview?
Easy, title, 1, 2, but nothing. I mean, I was a kid.
Yeah.
I don't like to interview.
Yeah.
And I never interviewed. I was just not sacked and put in a kitchen. I mean, that was about as much experience as I had on this kind of thing. So I was catapulted down to Boodles and came back. And I had to wait 2 days to be told if I got the job or not. And then word came I had, and suddenly, and that was their very generous push or boot. Not quite. I'm not going to put what did I get him?
Yeah, push or boot. Yeah,
push or boot. You know, exactly. You know, and they sent me to London.
Amazing.
And it was literally whoosh straight down on 125. The whole of Scotland and England flew past me. And and to the extent that for years, I'm just poodled back from London to Dundee and forget them. Other things to look at, you know, and you'd see York Cathedral, and you'd see York Minster and Newcastle, and you know, all these things, because I never got off the train. But it was amazing. And I got to Boodles, and of course, a young 20-year-old, and it was the height of punk and romantics, and all the world was in turmoil and change, and Thatcher was around, you know. I mean, the air was electric. And, you know, with equal amounts of excitement and fury and frustration and puzzlement with everyone. But in amongst all this, what was simmering were restaurants.
Yeah.
And chefs were coming to the fore in a way that they'd never done before.
Yeah.
And suddenly, I mean, when I was a prime example, I mean, very expensively educated, privately educated kids were not going into kitchens. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, if you were white, male, and middle class and privately educated, you were destined for a desk. And
destined for a desk. That's such a beautiful way of putting it.
You're like, what? Oh, God. Well, I'll put me in front of a chopping board and a knife. Job done. And so it was a new generation. I mean, sure, there were others, and and obviously George Perry Smith had started it way back in the day at the Hole in the Wall in Bath, and then followed that there was Rick Stein coming up, Simon Hopkinson, Alastair Little, Sean Hill, Roly Lee. I mean, amazing Joyce Molyneux. There was an amazing pantheon of people, and there was stuff going on in Scotland, Davy Wilson, at the Pete Inn, etc. And Nouvelle Cuisine, which was this very strange, I'm not sure Britain ever really quite understood what Nouvelle Cuisine was. You'd have such strange things like a carrot stuffed into a courgette and sliced. You're like,
why do you
have to go, what the fuck is that? You've done a Gigi, haven't you? I mean, what's a Gigi? You've garnished the dish. Why do you need to garnish anything?
Why do you think Britain didn't catch on to Nouvelle Cuisine, do you not think?
Because I think it happened at a very important time when we were emerging from the dark years of the war and rationing, which went into the 50s. And I think when the 60s came, it went off like a rocket, but it was still a post-war industry melting down time.
Yeah.
You know, the factories were closed. We were not it was not a pretty time.
The reverberations of the war were still kind of...
I think the ripples were still really, the waves on the floor, and it was wreckage coming up. And so I think, and with that, the little rays of sunshine, bizarrely, were found in cookery books. And Elizabeth David's Book of Mediterranean Food, which came out in 1950, which is closely followed by Summer Food and then French Country Cooking. And then her magnum opus, French Provincial Cooking in the 1960s. And my mum was one of, she was like, straight in there. There's amazing John Minton covers, which were a huge inspiration for the work John Broadley does for us. Quo Vadis, and Julian takes such delight in. So it became endlessly fascinating. Now there was a million thoughts, materialising simultaneously to Elizabeth David writing. Robert Carrier was emerging in Hintersham Hall, and cookery shops were appearing, selling French cookware. We were like,
just for context for listeners, I know Elizabeth Day was a big inspiration for you, and
yes.
But just for context for listeners, describe who she was and why did she, with her work, it was a ray of sunshine in sort of the muddy malaise of post-war. But like, why did she kind of burn into your soul?
Well, I think what's interesting, I think a woman. I've always related to women. I adore them. I think they're. I'm just, a gay boy going up on the east coast of Scotland. Women were very kind, even when you didn't know anything about it, and they knew. I mean, just one look and went, bit lying on his feet, that one, isn't he? Super, super sweet, and. And with that crazy thing, like the pals I had at school, I really liked their mums. I was obviously, it was all that kind of stuff growing up, you're a gawky kid. But one of the things that I'd clocked as a kid growing up were the piles of cookery books Mum had in the kitchen. And Elizabeth Day was always there. So I grew up, with just steeping into my subconscious without even knowing it. I mean, it certainly wasn't drummed in. But it was daily life. And a great chum of ours had a shop on the Perth Road in Dundee, which was a great long winding road from the West End that brought all the goods from the docks that landed, because Dundee's right on the estuary of the Tay, and would take the goods inland all the way to Perth. And she had a little shop called Pandora, and Joyce and her husband John were great pals of my mum and dad. And they all went to art college together, and we all practically grew up together in some form or another. And she was given she was the first person, certainly in Scotland, I don't know about England, probably, but in Scotland, who was allowed to buy goods from the Elizabeth David shop in Pimlico and sell it. And it was the first time you could buy these amazing little pottery bowls and stuff. And Elizabeth David was a culmination of generations of women that go right the way back to like the 17th century. And somehow there was a bracket of often upper class or upper middle class women who, probably because they were so bloody bored, nothing to bloody do, sit there in their crinolines going, fucking hell, what another deal of this, great, wow, thanks. And they were involved, I think food was fascinating. They got to feed the gang. Sometimes it was in a massive big house, sometimes in a steading, sometimes in an inn, whatever. Or just a home with kids, and gathered recipes and started writing these books. And in the 1850s, I think it is, Eliza Acton writes her masterpiece, Modern Cooking for Modern Women, which then was the spine for Mrs. Beeton. Mrs. Beeton comes along, who is so plebeian and bourgeois and boring. Also dead at 29. Her husband was a terror and absolutely workshopped her like there was no tomorrow.
What do you mean dead at 29?
She died very young.
What did her husband do to her?
Well, no, didn't do anything to her, but he took full advantage of. I mean, he really worked. He knew he had gold in his hands.
Right.
And so he took her reputation and just went off like a rocket. And
how did she die?
I think mortality back then was really, because it's pre-penicillin. So anything could get you. And so I think consumption, to be honest, I'm not sure. I would hate to tell a lie. So I don't know. I'm uninformed.
Sure.
But she was very young. And, if you read Mrs. Beaton, you'd think she was 150 when she died. I mean, when we do this, we always do, if you cooked everything once, you'd be... Anyway, amazing books.
What year was it for...
So Mrs. Beaton's late 19th century, early 20th century. And these are the women who start educating an emerging middle class of family.
Right.
Who have very reduced households. I mean, it's like they might have a maid and a cook or something. And a middle class family might have a cook. But women were getting interested in gardening and growing and herbs and health and salads, and all this was beginning to simmer. And then, of course, it's going guns firing by the time the 20th century emerges, and Britain's as rich as Greece's with this massive industrial, revolution that it's had, but bankrupt with this ridiculous empire. But the produce coming in, my goodness, so there was nothing they couldn't do. And so cooks were quite adventurous and things were on the change. And then, of course...
What sort of stuff were people cooking then?
Well, I think there is old English food, which is timeless, like pork pies and steak and ale and roast beef and all the classics you can think of. Interestingly, not fish and chips. That didn't come till much later, bizarrely. And
when did fish and chips
I
come?
think it's the 50s.
Really?
I think it's post...
It's interesting. I spoke to a guy called Rory Suddenly. We were talking about the invention of Italian food.
Yes.
Apparently, it's a load of bollocks, like what we see as lasagna and pizza.
Yeah.
That's a 50s thing.
All emigres. They just like slop. Give it to them. If it's wet and gooey, and if it's minced, they'll just chow down. Ragu. What is ragu? We eat mince and tatties. You go. That is ragu and tatties.
Yeah.
It's very funny. Always makes me laugh. So I think. A lot of that nonsense was done. But 2 world wars absolutely did for cooking in Britain without a shadow of a doubt. And the stuff, when folk came back from the war, the last thing they were going to do was go back into their kitchens and start doffing their caps again. There was none of it. And no one could afford staff, even if they could get them. So the world changed. People had to start cooking. And
sorry, just quickly, what were they cooking back in the... We said the pork pies.
Well,
this will jump around, by the way, loads. So
No, for sure. What were they called? Not being there, I don't really know. But I think it would have been a ham salad on, I think it would have been a roast on a Sunday, cottage pie on a Monday with the leftovers.
Yeah.
Cold cuts on Tuesday, fish pie on Wednesday, and maybe a rack of lamb on a Thursday, fish on Friday.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Very plain, very ordinary, not exciting. And because, fresh food has always been expensive when you live on an island. That because we import so much. And so, curry was made with curry powder. Well, Madhur Jaffrey comes along in the 1970s, blows that myth out. Madhur Jaffrey. Wow, have you got some fun ahead? Yeah. The best cookery book. If you love Indian food and you like to cook Indian food, just get a copy of Madhur Jaffrey's Invitation to Indian Cookery.
Right.
And follow the recipes to a T. Done.
What year was this?
She was a very esteemed Indian actress, married to a man called Saeed Jaffrey, who then subsequently divorced.
Yeah.
And she... God knows how she got it. I mean, I was a kid. A teenager. But I used to cook at home as a teenager. It was when I was allowed into Mum's kitchen. So that would have been late 70s, early 80s.
Cool.
And she just stood, she just had this funny little set, impeccably dressed and made up, beautiful and so elegant, and just effortlessly made this food. And we were all like, just fell in love with her.
Yeah.
Just amazing. And so I think Madhur Jaffrey did for Indian cooking what Claudia Roden did for Middle Eastern cooking. And suddenly these women writers who were the authorities on their subject took their place on the platform. And they really did change everything, and suddenly folk were devouring their books like thrillers. They couldn't get them fast enough.
Wow.
And it changed everything. And our perceptions, and suddenly we're cooking, suddenly we're eating hummus. And suddenly we're cooking aubergines. And, a lot of dishes were annihilated on the way. When poor ratatouille, I don't think has ever recovered. minestrone hasn't seen the light of day for 50 years. As atrocities were committed by things, and folk not really understanding what they were doing, or couldn't get the produce, so they just did terrible. It'd be flour mixed with tomato ketchup cooked on just insane. Luckily, I didn't encounter much of this, except on very odd occasions where I go, Mom, yes, I told you so. They do that, So it was really funny. And there was lots of hilarity. And then crazy television, like the Galloping Gourmet. And so fancy food was quite interesting on television. But I was never interested in it. I was drawn to, if Claudia Roden was going around the Mediterranean, I was glued to the box. If Madhur Jaffrey was going around India and speaking to spice growers, I was there. But the machismo of restaurants didn't really interest. It was harking back, it's really interesting. And I didn't really know or understand or read about any of that realm until Anthony Bourdain, as you said, came along.
Well, I think also like with what I love about you is I think words are really important. Like I love words, but like the fact you guys call it puddings, right? Like literally puddings versus dessert. You sort of think of this kind of.
Well, I think just desserts, frankly. Like, oh dear.
But pudding feels way more sort of maternal, generous. It feels like more like a hug. Like those things are important. And obviously, I've had the profiteroles here, stuffed my face with them. Like they are two.
Drag some down.
Yeah, I'll absolutely devour some right now. But I think it's fascinating how. Yeah, all your sort of voracious reading and sort of steeping all this knowledge and then finding your own style through sort of, as you say, your love of females is super, super fascinating. The on style, like I was reading or watching, I should say, Sir Terence Conran last night. I know you work with him.
Oh, darling man.
And he's,
missed.
So I didn't realise that. He was saying in the 50s, he was saying how sort of...
Oh, he was there as well.
He was saying...
Robert Carey, Elizabeth David and Terence Conran.
Well,
Terence would have it that he invented France, but a lot of people want to wear that crown.
He was saying that, like, in the 50s, there wasn't a word, like, the word design wasn't in the vernacular.
No.
Like, and it's just... And I was like, looking back, I was thinking, fucking hell. Like, and now you think of London and Soho specifically where we are now as this sort of vibrant plate, like verve.
Oh God! If you came into Soho, you literally did. Your collar was up and your hat down, and you were like running into Camisa to buy your olive oil and garlic.
Yeah.
And you probably, consider yourself propositioned to get your bottom pinched or something. I think that was. No. I think design, food, art, music. There always would be fetishes. You didn't, if you liked them, and my parents were steeped in it all. So when we all began to bump into each other, and I met Terence at Bendham properly, because I was at the cold starter section, was right by the door when he used to carry stuff in from Barton Court. And he became a lifelong friend, he's a wonderful man.
What did he teach you about creativity and the creative process?
Well, the great thing Terence let us do and encouraged Simon, who was happy to embrace it, was let them fuck up.
Wow.
He was incredible at this. He would let us stumble, because we really were very nice, because us chefs back then, really, we could cook, but our palates hadn't developed. I mean, British cooking was still way in the wings at this time.
Yeah.
And we were still in the thrall of France, and we barely understood Italian cooking. We certainly didn't understand Spanish, and we certainly didn't get, Greek cooking, when we thought this was foreign muck. Well, no, that was pretty much the premise. I mean, which was unhinged, considering how deep our culture was steeped in that lore. So I think it was, and Terence just said, okay, well, if you're going to make risotto with cream, maybe not.
But encouraging you to fuck up.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, he said, well, good try, not wrong. Butter, cheese, that's a risotto. And so things like, he was very good, and he would never slam you. He was always very encouraging, and he would just say, that's an excellent mayonnaise. And you go, but it's just mayonnaise. And he went, you wouldn't believe, I've eaten the world over 3 times, how poor mayonnaise can often be. I'm like, wow. So just that, and of course the devil is in the detail, as we always know. And it was things like, if a kitchen made a really good salad, or a really good bowl of mayonnaise, you almost were going, phew, I'm in safe hands. The rest of it's going to be good. Whereas many were eyes on main courses, meat, sauce. That was it. They were blind to everything else. But that was a very big part of the growing up of kitchens in Britain, I think, when these cobwebs and myths and strange ideas were really just suddenly, weirdly, whatever that's about.
Yeah, how did style and... Because again, it's like something through like prepping for this conversation. You know what's absolutely mental, mate? London is literally the greatest foodie city in the world with so many absolutely banging, delish restaurants opening on the reg. I absolutely love it. But look, let's get real. There's lots of times where tables are still sat empty, when your favourite spot is silently struggling. And look, every single table counts. Everyone needs solutions, and they need solutions very fast. And that, my friends, is where Eat Club comes in. Eat Club is a profitability tool created by hospitality insiders, including the absolute Don, Marco Pierre White. Eat Club gives top bars and restaurants control of a new stream of quality paying customers to fill those quiet times. No faff, no upfront costs, only upside. Look, if you're in hospitality and you want bums on seats when you need them most, please drop the founder Pan or the VP of the UK Liz, both absolute legends. Drop them an email, fillmytables@eatclub.co.uk, fillmytables@eatclub.co.uk. That will get you straight through to them and they can help. Please, let's turn those empty tables into profit. If you're a challenger brand that's absolutely killing it in D2C, but you're struggling to crack retail, then you've got to listen to this. Maybe you've got an Ocado listing, maybe you've got a Whole Foods listing, maybe you're absolutely killing it in Selfridges, maybe you're absolutely killing it in your farm shop and your indies. But my friends, making the leap, crossing El Chasm, crossing El Rubicon to grocery retail is not easy. It's the Champions League of FMCG. It's super hard. It means playing at a higher level. And that's where so many amazing brands sadly stumble. Look, retailers want stories backed by data, not dreams and a pretty pitch deck. And let's be real, supermarkets are not just going to magically make a space for you and your little brand. They need data. Something's got to go for you to get in, for you to get on shelf. And that is why I've got to tell you about Rockstar. They are the team that's helping purpose-led FMCG brands go from gut instinct dreams to unstoppable pitch decks that actually unlock retailers. Rockstar are not like another data company that force feed you data like foie gras, that act like a NASA space mission. It's super, super simple to use. Their team are amazing and they actually get the challenger mindset. Rockstar are your shortcut to smarter decisions, stronger pitches, and investor confidence, all built specifically for challenger brands like yours. You don't need a massive sales team, you need Rockstar. Link in the show notes. Click that link and you'll be able to book a free demo with Rockstar. Highly, highly recommend that, and thank me later. Like prepping for this conversation is like, I didn't realise how kind of new style and design is.
Oh, it's in its infant. It's teenagers.
Yeah, like in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah,
like, how do they sort of like force it into the zeitgeist? Do you know what I mean? Like,
such an interesting thing. I lucked out because Mum and Dad were interested, you know. And so when Habitat,
were you weird if you like were into that at the time?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely light on your feet. Definitely, you know, or of an artistic persuasion, possibly, or something stupid like, you know, something really bonkers.
Yeah.
And no, you didn't shout about it at all. And you know, because homes back then normally it was chintzy, flowery wallpaper. Fitted carpets was the norm, and you know, and this incredible generation that came out and were kick-started by the Festival of Britain in 1952, in a huge attempt to bring Britain, ignite Britain up again, and design was a huge part of it, but it was very London-centric, and this amazing these structures were built on the embankment on the south side. Of the Thames, which became the National Royal Festival Hall and all that, this, you know, suddenly brutalist architecture, and everyone's going, oh, the Georgians. I went, well, the Georgians had slaves, so let's just deal with that, shall we? And then take it from there, will we? What about 5 families that owned it all? Does that remind you of anything? And everyone else is in servitude, bobbing and curtsying, and some of these estates employed 1,000 servants. You really want to go back there? Yeah. You think that's going back to the good. Okay, maybe for 5 people.
But didn't Winston Churchill government come in and they basically did it for a year or something?
Yeah.
It was a Labour government that did the Royal Festival of Britain, and then...
Yeah, he was ousted after...
And they got rid of it immediately.
Oh, yeah.
But the only thing that was kept was the Royal Festival Hall, I think.
Yeah. Well, amazing structures. And I don't even know what, bits of it and scraps will be around somewhere, but it's amazing. I mean, it's well documented brilliantly.
Yeah.
And
so that was the sort of thing that forged it into the zeitgeist. And then how did it begin to sort of blossom and flower into...
Well, I think suddenly, youth discovered sex. Couples could walk hand in hand. All the old taboos were being blown away.
Contraception pill...
Oh, God, family planning.
Yeah.
Fun and games, and, do you know what? I wouldn't mind a kiss and a hug and a fuck. I don't think it's too much to ask for. Oh, my God, civilization's going to end. No, you're not going to go to a convent, darling. No, that's fine. You'll be all right. Yeah. No, I just think, it was enlightenment was coming.
Yes.
And they were pulling down the curtains and they were letting light in and it was all this cobwebs being dusted away. And old notions that had hung around far too long and really outstayed their welcome were just cast up, cast out, swept up, put in the bin, taken, carted away.
What did Terence teach you about, there was a kid who used to work for, called Bo, who listens to the podcast, worked at Fallow, and he reached out to me. I was having a load of drinks in Clapham. I was quite drunk, to be fair. And he was like, I'm doing my dissertation. I'm in design in Manchester. He was like, do you mind if I interview you to and I was like, yeah, absolutely, not a problem. And he was asking me some really intriguing questions about how design shapes the experience of restaurants and actually how it changes the taste of your food, right? Because it's
God, yes.
I feel like, okay, so you could make a most wondrous dish. If you eat it in a fucking shitty halls in the dreg ends of Manchester, it's not going to taste quite as nice in sort of a palatial setting, right? But what did Sir Terence teach you about design and how did he think about sort of the bigger setting, how it impacted the taste of the food?
Well, I think his trajectory is so interesting because he had the Soup Kitchen, which I think was on the King's Road, way back in the 50s, and he decided he loved restaurants and realised there's no money in this. And so he went off and created his first £1 billion empire.
Which was Habitat,
and Mother Care and all that. And with Habitat, he just wanted, a bit like Gilbert and George say, art for the people, art for everyone. Terence was like, everyone should have good design, and would you rather have a coffee in a plain white cup or do you want some busy pattern on this? That's simple. And do you want fine bone china or do you want a chunky pottery cup? Or, isn't tea and coffee better from cups than mugs? Really simple thoughts. He was he was really, it all fascinated him. I think that was the great thing. He loved a great setting with great people sitting down on good chairs at a great table, beautifully laid, magnificently laid in some instances, eating good food and drinking wonderful wine. I mean, all of it was fantastic. And you were like, wow. And Mum and Dad, in their very, very modest way on the east coast of Scotland, had embraced that fully, and they were part of that new generation. And they were all college students, and they were makers and doers of stuff. Yeah. So they'd embraced that early. So I'd grown up very aware of this world, and these names weren't new to me by any stretch. But when I suddenly found myself sitting down at a table with Terence or cooking in one of his restaurants, because that was one of the great things, because I did 18 years at the Blueprint, years after meeting him at Bendham. And we used to have lunch every other week together, and it was wonderful. And can I remember one thing we talked about? No. Do I remember it being amazing? Yeah, absolutely. And slightly a bit tongue-tied, a bit gawky, funnily enough, still. God, but he was instrumental in growing my confidence, I suppose. I think that's...
How did he do that?
I think because, the first time I did it, I was so tongue-tied and, just like, I've got nothing to say to you, I've got nothing to give you, what have you. And he wasn't having that.
Wow.
And the same with his sister Priscilla, who's equally precious and as close a friend as well. And they were just, they would bring very quietly, very brilliantly, bring you out of yourself. And to that, I'm forever grateful.
How do they get? How do they do that? Through like questions or just like being
subtle? So I mean, do you know what? Kindness and encouragement.
Wow.
I really do think that's what it was. Every single time it seemed to be, I was always that kid being taken under someone's wing.
Yes.
I don't know what that was about. And they sweetly did that. And they were very generous. And not only did we lunch at, together at the Blueprint, and because that was work, but also, would go out together and, try other things. And always generous and always giving. Not easy. I mean, I think fascinating people aren't easy. I think that's
How is he not easy?
I think he could be wonderfully curmudgeonly. So that was my job. We had a bad day at the office. Good lunch day. Make sure it's good. But I'm
soften him up slowly. Yeah,
exactly. Because there was one hilarious time we came in and we went off on some fantastic. For the life of me, I can't remember what it was, but but I did have to. I was just going like that, just going, And then he looked at me and I went, "Feeling better? Oh, should we just have lunch now?" and I could be that cheeky on a very rare occasion. We just go, that's
well, so was he kind of, when you say curmudgeon, was he sort of stuck in his old ways, or like how?
Well, what we didn't know at the time was he was being really deviled by a bad back that he couldn't treat because the treatment it required was at odds with the medication you could get back. I mean, now they've fixed it in a nanosecond.
Sure.
So we didn't know he was in a lot of pain.
Right.
And he was a very busy man. I mean, he authored, I don't know how many books he authored. Well, the shelf is, it's probably the length of this table.
Yeah.
And there was a design company, the Conran Shops, Conran Architects, Conran Restaurants. It was huge what he did. And he had an elephantine-sized brain and mind. But it was a lot. And I just think, and old men are curmudgeonly, I think, generally.
Yeah.
I think it just goes with the turf, oh, here we go.
Comes with the territory, yeah. Take me into, right into the apex and kind of painting the colours and the smells of the Blueprint Cafe. Because that was, down in, is it the Chad Thames, which back then was, it was kind of a no man's land.
Oh, God, yeah.
And, he really kind of...
Well, his lovely story is that he was on, there was a gathering on one of the Dutch sail barges for some do. And they sailed, the Tower Bridge went up, they sailed through. And Terence was just looking at the ruins of all these wharfs along the South Bank and just going, what is this? These are all bang in the middle, central London addresses that because they're on the South Bank are just being left to rack and ruin, and what is this? No longer are these vast fleets of merchant navy ships coming in and, that's practically gone. So what's happening with all this? And so that was the big thing with time. He could conjure and see what Butler's Wharf could become. And indeed that's what happened. And on the other side of an empty plot was the old P&O office. That, standing empty.
Yeah.
So Terence bought the lease for that as well. And then he created the design museum. I want a museum and I want a design museum and I want to, show, good design to people to look at. And to get the last cash injection required to open it, the front of the design museum it's almost like these steps going up in these terraces. And the piano nobile on the first floor, amazingly, Terence was the one who just said, oh, God, he said, why does everybody want to go to a cafe and buy rubbish bag of crisps, and a really rubbish bowl of soup for a £5 and think that's good? He said, this is wrong. He said, but we will have a cafe for coffee and cake and biscuits and what have you, for sure. And we'll do good salads, that whole culture. But the Blueprint was going to be opened as a restaurant. And it would just be sited on the first floor of a museum that was dedicated to design. And
what did it look like inside the restaurant?
Oh, it was beautiful.
How did he do it?
Well, he did it very plainly because I don't think they had a pot to piss in by this stage. I think all the money was in the bricks and mortar of the design museum.
Yeah.
So we went in and it was just this huge stretch of pale oak floors and these two big, massive white columns. With the service areas, and they were redolent of an Eames table, a Ray and Charles Eames. So it was they were white Formica, I think was Formica. With this lovely wood trim and bent wood chairs, and then those were the round tables, so in different sizes running along the windows, and then these beautiful red topped like classic Paris French bistro tables, and this wonderful red Formica with these gorgeous big thick legs, and then the bentwood chairs in there. And then on the walls were all photographs of all the designers, redolent of what David Bailey did for Le Caprice. These were all the covers for the Blueprint magazine.
Wow.
So it was all that thing, hence where the name came from. And then this incredible light, because it was the whole wall facing the Thames was glass. Wow, in this enormous terrace that had this great huge awning that spanned the length of it, which I think at the time, if I'm right, was the longest awning in Europe.
Wow.
Because because it was easily the length of Quo Vadis, if not a bit more, I think. And we were 4 London townhouses. I mean, it was colossal. And it was amazing. It was absolutely beautiful and so simple. And it was David Mellor cutlery. And
what did that look like?
Beautiful. It was the Odeon. So it was very simple stainless steel and quite stumpy tines on the forks, but a beautiful black almost.
Wow.
Black handled knives that were lovely. Plain white plates, plain round white plates, so you're accustomed to this, but even whiter. And I think it was all a Pilco or Piliouvet, classic French white plates that we had. And that was it. That was all it was. And she was a beauty. And folk used to say, 18 years, and that bit long. And I said, lifers get less. And I went, I know. I said, but, what am I going to do? I said, how do you beat this? I mean, I'm looking down on I cross the Thames every morning. I can take my pick to go to the Borough Market or down to Spa Terminus, and amazing wealth of food producers and suppliers, all in the hinterland, which was amazing. And that was unforeseen. That grew through my tenure. And there was the Pool of London and the Tower, and you went, doesn't
get better than this, yeah.
Yes, and I'll bet you I end up in a basement if I do leave here. And hello.
That's amazing. In terms of just going back to what he taught you, so about kindness breeds confidence, allowing you to fuck up, and if anything,
amazing, yeah.
I love people who push the boundaries or do things differently or create amazing things. Is there any other sort of principles that, not with work or life, that he sort of taught you, kind of was through osmosis? I think you learn a lot from people, not necessarily by what they actually told you, but just by being around them.
Well, I think one of the great things is that he's very worldly. There's a big world out there, and one of the things that definitely made our generation of chefs stand out was we'd holidayed abroad. We'd been to France and Italy and Spain and eaten abroad, so we knew about tomatoes and garlic and olive oil, not with any great plan to do anything, but we understood food culture, and we loved restaurants, and we didn't. And it's hard to imagine a time when there wasn't a restaurant scene in the whole of the United Kingdom. There were very tiny little oases here and there, but for the most part, it was posh and privileged and really quite dull, I think.
I swear they're all in hotels, weren't they? Yeah. It was and
a bit snooty, and a bit Terrellini tablecloths, and you were like, ooh, don't know about this.
How did he help you find your unique style?
Wow, because I was a bit of a blank canvas, because I think a lot of my lot, I mean, we didn't eat in restaurants. I mean, we didn't have the money for that. We ate at home. If we went to a restaurant, it was once a year on New Year's Day when Granny took us to some posh hotel for a big lunch. That was it. So the restaurant thing, I think that's what's so fascinating for me looking back on it, was I literally grew up as a cook as the restaurant business in the British Isles grew and British cooking began slowly to come to the fore. And there's a great, the spider's web that is the family tree now of all the characters involved is colossal. But way up there is Terence, definitely, as a founding, massive presence in all this to make it work. And I think his real the real Medal of Honor went to Bibendum. Because Simon Hopkinson was cooking at Hilaire And Terence had fallen, and Caroline, who he's married to at the time, had fallen in love with him and just said, your food's just amazing. And because it was a perfect roast chicken and, just beautiful food. And probably what would have been called back then a sort of bourgeois, bonne femme style of French cooking. It was very much the fall back then. And when, and we'd all cycle past the Michelin building, which was not an estate, but, very rather faded grandeur.
Yeah, what was
that? That would have been coming up to the late 80s.
Right, and before that, what was it?
It was a garage. It was a Michelin. It was literally a Michelin HQ. Wow. That was the building you pulled up to get your tank filled to go barreling out west.
Fucking hell, yeah.
It was a garage.
Yeah, it's a garage.
It was a garage.
They could do.
And absolutely.
You should have garages like that these days.
Off the charts, beautiful, magnificent. I believe the expression is a fuck off. Well,
yeah.
It's an absolute fuck off garage, but a garage nonetheless.
Yeah.
And Terence just turned it into this. Along with, the great Brian Henderson, who was the architect, who was his great chum, who's Fergus Henderson's dad, was the architect for it. And they were great, great chums. So that was another whole side to this incredible tale.
Yeah.
We all became great chums. And yes, because Fergus is, not only is he the same age as me, but has a sister 2 years younger, called Annabelle. You couldn't make it up.
Wow.
Strange things.
That's the other thing. we were talking about, I love the idea of synchronicity where, all these different things linked together.
Yes.
Completely random things. But one thing I wanted to explore with you, mate, is, architecture and food and how those two things dance.
God.
But, because Fergus he's a trained architect, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, what have you learnt between those two kind of worlds colliding?
Well, it's very sweet because we really did just fall into each other's arms, without even knowing each other and kindred spirits, but from very different roots. And Fergus, I don't think, like a great many, Alastair never worked with anyone. I think he just went into his career. And Simon Hopkinson barely ever worked for anyone. They just went straight into their careers as well. Whereas I come through, apprenticeship and, step by step. And so it's very interesting when those two worlds collide and they gel. They didn't clash. It was really interesting.
Yeah, because it's the gellingness of the which kind of they kind of melt and marble and soak into each other, which kind of surprises me because they kind of. But how so do you believe?
I think there's it because we were talking about the blueprint earlier, and if you look at the blueprint back there, white walls, plain wooden floor, plain white tables, plain wooden chairs. You go to St. John's, plain white walls, plain table paper cloths, for sure. We didn't have tablecloths, but paper cloths and bentwood chairs. You're like, wow, and I didn't know what the connections were at the time.
Yeah.
So I think, but we both obviously liked that aesthetic.
Yeah.
Very much. Why,
when you link it to the food, is that to make the food the
food, so white plates primarily why a plate is white, so that all your attention is on the food.
Wow.
Rather than the curious, remarkable, amazing things that people do now in the potters now, just off the charts extraordinary. But for us, and particularly our generation, the white plate was all about your eyes would be drawn right to the centre of the plate. That would be it.
How do you? Because I interviewed Margaret Henderson a couple of years ago. She's brilliant.
She's amazing.
She's amazing, and I asked her a lot about St. John. But the one thing I fucking didn't ask, which I wanted to ask her, is who does the copywriting for St. John? Because you read that and it's
it's all Ferg's voice.
That's what I was going to say.
All of it's based on Ferg's voice.
So that's because I was like, that is some of the best writing ever, regardless if he wasn't even linked to the restaurant. I can't. The way that's described, like a chocolate pudding or like a chocolate tart. You're reading it, you're kind of.
And you can't believe, I'm so cheeky. And
will he be writing it then? Still, who writes it then?
I would imagine what they do now is they just going over things because Ferg is sadly not well, and so he is less and less able. But I think still where he can, he does.
Yeah.
But I think the copy, I think it is just a rehash of what.
But that voice is him.
Pure him. Yeah.
Wow.
For sure. Yes.
How does again, as we say, we'll jump around, Jeremy. But how do you think food and words sort of intersect? Because I think I think that's another really fascinating place to play because it's it adds a certain soul, I think, to someone's food. And even when I read your book, like you what do you call it's the fish chapter is like shiny little dinings.
Oh, the silver little
dinings from the deep.
Silver darlings from the deep.
Yeah,
because herring were always known as the silver darlings.
Yeah, I mean it's an amazing way to say this is about fish, right? You know what I mean?
Well, you could just write fish.
Yeah, you could write fish, but that's fucking boring. Yeah. But yeah, so how do you sort of think about those two things?
Well, I think words and recipes and cooking have a wonderful play with each other. And I love how they come in. And I would hesitate to use the word poetry for a recipe, but there is definitely a rhythm to how you cook. And I think the whole point of a cookery book, first and foremost, is to woo somebody into the kitchen. And I think what's great about it now is we've finally got rid of the idea that, the kitchen's a tyranny, it's a terrorizing place. You're going to burn, you'll burn spaghetti, you'll burn water, for God's sakes. If you can't, that's nonsense. Yeah. It's a series of actions that will result in something delicious. It's fine.
Yeah.
And also, fuck it up. By all means, as often as you like, as if we all came ready-made.
Yeah.
We didn't. Nobody just pulled the cellophane off us, popped us in the microwave, and stuck us in front of a cooker.
Yeah,
that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, flat pack chefs.
Absolutely. They're pumping away like mad.
Yeah.
It doesn't come. It comes through years and years. And famously, back when I was a kid, you were actually more impressive in how you got out of being in the poop than you were. If you sailed through it, you were boring. But if the kitchen was in full flight and all hell was breaking loose, it was how you dealt with that, and how you got out of being, and suddenly your section was sinking. And you went, oh God, how do I handle this? And, just bringing that back in was how you were judged. And, if the mayonnaise splits, boo-hoo, or the French regularly say, tant pis, or tant pis. Stuff happens, and what's great is getting back in the saddle and doing it again and learning from, or understanding why it happened. And all right, I had the toilet too quickly. Oh, bugger, I used eggs from the fridge. They should have been at room temperature. And these million little things, it's like playing, and word games are like that. The more you play a word game, the more words stick in your mind and in your subconscious. So the next time you play, you go, oh God, there's that word, yes. And you'll start
they
mining.
Start linking together. Yeah, and also...
you'll start, because it is like a tapestry.
Yeah.
The threads, you start stitching away like mad, and, suddenly... And then you put a blue thread in, and then there's a white thread, and then there's a...
Yeah, I suppose there's juxtapositions in writing, there's probably juxtapositions in cooking, and there's you could probably go through, as you said, it's like poetry, but the two things dance.
Well, and God knows, many's the time I've started writing a page, and then halfway through it just went... I don't know what that is. Sometimes it works beautifully, and you think this is wonderful. And other times you just stare at a blank screen and go, "Oh my God."
But you need the fuck ups to find the gold.
Oh God, yeah.
Within the lead is the gold.
Yes, of course. It's just not. I think that's what the lure of the world we've made now, that you can go into a supermarket and it's like Christmas 24/7 there. Everything's shiny and bright, and they've really workshopped the lighting. Everything's wrapped, everything glitters, everything's bright and abundant. There's tons of it. You're like, who is growing all these blueberries? There's a lot of blueberries going around, in every shop imaginable.
I interviewed Franco Fabini. He's the founder of Natura a couple of weeks ago. He was over from New York. Amazing human being, and he was talking to me about like an Egyptian mango, and the way he was describing it was like cutting it open the first time, and the smells and the aura, and it was like kind of, he was saying it's like a work of art, like all the sort of the red and the crimson like coming through this bloody mango, and I was like, wow. And we were talking about food markets, and I read somewhere that you're a food market junkie. Where are some of the best food markets in London, you think, and where do you go for different?
Well, I think what is amazing is, because I think Paris, generally the impression I've always had is that the bitter regret that they demolished Liao.
Right.
And then it's just this gaping wound with this brutalist concrete shopping mall underneath it, this Walmart thing. And amazingly, we didn't knock down Covent Garden. The structures are still there. And it's hopelessly impractical as a fruit and veg market now. But at the height of its day, it was the hub of London. And what is interesting is, and I saw the tail end of it when I got to London in the early mid-80s, when the food community in the West End was still thriving. There was still a massive Italian population in Soho. There were butchers and all sorts, and grocers in Mayfair. Clerkenwell was thriving. There was all, and now we even just lost Camisa the other day. And if you walk about,
what did you say?
Camisa and Son, Fratelli Camisa, which was one of the last Italian deli on Old Compton Street, which sadly closed its doors. And so that chapter's now concluded. And in Alastair Little's Soho Cooking, you can read about all this world. It was just wonderful. But Berwick Street Market, which used to be a thriving, guns firing, where you could buy anything, from silk stockings to Egyptian mangoes and everything in between. And I mean everything.
Yeah.
Everything. And so much fun. And now it's just a few coffee stalls and things, And so it's moved on. But I think one of the things, miraculously, as the West End began to diminish, one of the things is all the boroughs around the West End began to ignite. And so when I first came to London, if you asked a cab driver to take you to Hackney, you literally went laughed at. And he went, and good luck getting back. Because just went. Whereas now, it's the Dernier Cri in the last one. It's got this amazing food community. And that's all the way from Peckham, Dartford, Kentish Town, you name it. All the satellites, all the little villages have all, they all have amazing bakeries. They've all got amazing coffee shops. They all have great pizza. They all have great burgers, etc., etc. And a lot of good restaurants as well. And so I think that is really fascinating. And as the West End diminished, where it's interesting to watch the passage, the borough market was about to be demolished. It was very under threat.
Why was that under threat?
Well, it was over 1,000 years old. It's priceless real estate. When these markets, pubs, are sited brilliantly, right bang in the centre of town.
Yeah.
So it's priceless real estate. And this movement just stepped in and went, that is outrageous. What, we're just going to have developments everywhere? Where's the heart and soul in the world? And amazingly, it was saved. The entire food community descended, pretty much spearheaded by Henrietta Green and Randolph and Anita Monmouth Coffee and Neil's Yard Dairy, and that whole gang, and the wonderful Tony Booth, sadly, no longer
Tony Booth
was a wonderful greengrocer.
Yeah.
He was one of the very early greengrocers there. And he was in fact, he was a Leadenhall Market, really. And so Leadenhall Market remains, but it's basically just wine bars and shops and, what have you. I mean, it's certainly not a trading market.
Yeah.
But Borough thrived, and then it went through all sorts of weird machinations. God knows what, I stayed well out of it. But it's now settled into an amazing mix of restaurants and dynamic and traders. And it's really great. And then this bizarre thing, I went, oh, it's so touristy. And I went, how often do you go to Venice? How often do you go to Rome?
It's so true.
How often do you go to New York? What do you mean tourists? Rome's been nothing but a tourist trap for 3,000 years, you nut jobs.
Yeah,
so I get so bothered, but I get so like, oh, the tourists are spoiling everything. But no, the tourists are what keep this going, actually.
Yeah, it's so true.
So mental. Anyhow, Borough was finally settled into this brilliant thing, and there's Brindisa and Neil's Yard Dairy, Cheek by Jar with the Ginger Pig, and all these restaurants thriving, and all the satellites around. And if you look at a classic structure of a market, where there's a great market and there's a great produce, you have these amazing people, restaurants will naturally thrive in the environ, which is exactly what's happened down there.
Yeah.
And then you'll consequently have really great wine bars and restaurant, and it just naturally, the ripple effect of good produce is remarkable.
Well, that's Franco's whole thing, is flavour first.
Absolutely.
Flavour, everything is downstream from flavour.
Absolutely.
And obviously, great ingredients.
Well, that's what we crave. I literally don't care what it looks like. We'll take all the weirdo veg you can.
So what are some of the best markets you think in London on the sort of, as you say, the satellite peripheries?
Hackney is amazing. And folk get very annoyed about all the traders with, baby clothes and things. I'm like, well, there's always been babies. I don't want you getting upset about someone knitting something for a baby. Why would you get upset about that? It's so weird. And it's right beside the most amazing tinned food man with amazing tinned fish. And I think that's fantastic, And you can't start the children's young enough as far as I'm concerned. So I think Baby Grow and a tin of sardines is excellent shopping. And then there's really good fruit and veg around there. And there's a brilliant farmer's market. I think they're amazing. I mean, there's the Hackney Farm Market. There is the great one up on, I can't remember the name of the street, but it's just north of London Fields, heading towards Dalston Lane, I think. Brilliant. The Turkish Food Centre. There's because where there's green lanes, there's the whole Turkish Cypriot thing in the East End is incredible. And then there's all the Petticoat Lane craziness and all the Whitechapel, with mangoes and saris side by side, which is amazing.
What pulled you to? Where were you living before Hackney? Because you live in Hackney now. Like, what pulled you there? Like,
oh God. A gay boy should never share a flat with his sister.
Right.
It was actually that simple. And my sister and I were sharing a flat
Where were you
in
living?
Soho.
Right.
And then we moved to an amazing flat in Covent Garden. And I think I was just beginning to emerge as, trying to know who I was, see who I was, And so my poor sister was, okay, here we go. All right. I said, darling, do you have to go off like a stick of dynamite at both ends? And I went, I think I have to. I've been a complete dweeb all my life, so it's my turn now.
Yeah.
So she was like, oh, God, here we go.
Amazing.
And she was a brilliant shopper. And one day she came back and she said, I bought a flat. And I went, fuck, oh my God. So I had to get my skates on and sort myself out. And so a friend of my sister's was an estate agent in Hackney, and this big building had been developed. And it was one of the very early ones.
What year was this, rough?
This would have been just before the millennia. So about 99 or something.
Oh, wow, so you've been there for a long time then,
I know, cobwebs.
So you must have seen it really blossom into what it is now.
Oh, there was dust balls. I mean, it was literally, there was Broadway Market was, I think there was the Dove, there was an amazing DVD shop there that I really missed. It was brilliant. But little else besides, really. I mean, so to see it now, you're like, wow.
Yeah.
And then, and if you say, I live between, I used to go, there's all where in Hackney, London Fields and sort of Victoria Parkway, and they go, oh. Now they're like, oh no, really? And it's quite funny. Smug, a bit smug, a bit smug.
That's a good bet, that, yeah.
Not bad.
Where do you, what are some of your sort of favourite restaurants around there? Or where do you...
oh God, lots. I think a steak tartare and chips at Bistro Tech is a joy. Love what Davey and Pablo do. And it's an amazing room, Bistro Tech. It's just this light-filled, beautiful space. And always a great crowd. I love it there. There's a brilliant new Korean one called Miga that's just opened up on Mayor Street. That's fantastic. Mangal 2's just up the road still. There is Cafe Cecilia, which is wonderful. Rochelle Canteen, naturally. Obs. Lila's, of course, if you can ever get a table. The list is endless. I mean, the shopping and restaurant thing it's really great. And I love the fact it's settled down now into just a very natural thing.
What do you mean settled down now?
Well, once you shuck that new kid on the block thing, which is a real pain in the ass when everyone says you're the new hot thing.
Yeah.
And everyone beats a path to the door and then they move on to the next new thing, which is a very annoying business. Because the thing is, ironically, when you start, you actually don't want anyone to come and see you for a couple of weeks, so you can just get into it.
Yeah.
Start finding your feet. And then it's not 2 weeks in you need a review, it's 2 years in. 2-3 years down the line, where you aren't the new kid on the block anymore, and then you might actually need a review.
Yeah.
In my humble opinion.
Wow.
But far be it for me to say.
Yeah. Yeah, because who was I speaking to? Apparently in New York, the in restaurant is way more prevalent than it is here. So it's like going to the...
Oh my God, if you don't get a table in the first 2 weeks...
It's being in. So it's this kind of like... Actually opening a restaurant in New York's kind of precarious because it's like you have to be the hot thing, but the hot thing... you can only be the hot thing for so long, and then before you know it. Whereas I think here there's a bit more of a kind of slower, not slower, but there's more kind of people will go there more, you know, if they like something, which is super interesting. Let's talk about Alastair Little, because I know you work with him, and I think I read somewhere you said like he was fucking hilarious, and I think
amazing. He's an amazing, wonderful.
Like, describe the first day you met him, and then I'd love to know how he used humour to push boundaries, because I think, or do radical things. I think is exactly what you said.
Well, I mean, the thing to understand about Alastair, he's ferociously bright.
Ferociously bright.
Ferocious. He had an amazing intellect, and there was no subject on which he couldn't expound, let alone talk. And so, and he never stopped talking, ever.
Right.
There was this hilarious thing. We were cooking with him in Italy, and he was backing into a fridge with a carcass, talking, and turned around, put the carcass down, and came out still talking. We were all like, how do you do that? I mean, it's just amazing. You know, most people just go, can you excuse me for a few minutes? You know, I'm like, Alice, no, just, you know, and it was all done. I know he was hilarious, and he, you know, the original pin-up boy. I mean, he was, what's his route from cooking in Soho? Yes, because he told this amazing story once. Or was it Charles Gray told me? The famous actor Charles Gray was at a bar in Knightsbridge where Dudley Moore used to play the piano out the back, really properly zhushy. And the doorbell rang, and Alastair Little in full tux, way before he became a chef, walked in.
What was he doing before he was a chef?
Well, he was a maître d'. He studied archaeology at Cambridge. I'm not even sure if he graduated. He might be one of that lot.
Yeah.
Just skimmed through. You know, not well. I didn't know him then, so you know, that's a dim chapter. But he was an archaeologist, and I just think he, like many people who ended up in the restaurant business, not for him. You know, and just said, "Oh God, I've got this great education, but." Yeah. I don't want to do this. It's not for me, whatever the thought was. So to London he went, and I think he got a job anyway at this bar as a maître d'. Not dissimilar, I think, like a lot of us did a stint front of house. Everyone who works in the kitchen should do a stint front of house. Because amazing things can happen. And in this instance, through the door comes Lauren Bacall.
Lauren Bacall.
Being Humphrey Bogart's wife, one of the great, magnificent icons of golden Hollywood. Beautiful beyond belief. And fur coat off, promptly sat down, doorbell rings a bell, and in comes Ava Gardner, equally magnificent icon of golden Hollywood, and sits down. And Alastair is now eyes out on stocks. They're just going, the sheer glamour that's performed, you know, immaculately coiffed and groomed and there. And then in walks Charles Gray, who was a very eminent, famous English art, very camp, very brilliant, who you probably remember being he's the narrator in the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Right.
So it's his voice.
Yes.
And so he comes in, and the three of them sit down, and Alistair's going, oh, you know, just furs out like this. And then promptly, would you like something to do? Oh, whiskey, yeah, gin, vodka, you know, and he goes, okay. And so came back and comes back with a tray of, you know, whiskey and something, and a gin and tonic and about. Oh, darling, no, not glasses, bottles. And I think if anything sums Alastair up, it's that. It was just always like, how can you just make this better and more fun? And I think he had an enormous spirit, a great sense of humour, ferociously bright, probably the best palate I've ever encountered. And that's vying side with Simon Hopkinson. I think he and Simon fought poles apart in many respects, but arrived at the same conclusion from very different routes.
Right.
And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, go into sink into that a bit more. How they're, because I think you described them as I've read that you described them as polar opposites, but then as you say, meet this. Section.
God! When it came to literally at the pot, you know, there would be the same. And because Quo Vadis, Bendham was this huge Titanic of a glamorous. I mean, it was an ocean liner, magnificent and huge and lavishly expensive, and you know, very rich and extravagant, unashamedly. And Alastair was he had cooked at 192 in Notting Hill, which is a very famous wine bar, where Mary Lou Sturridge and there's a whole cast of list of wonderful people there. And Alastair cut his teeth in the kitchen there. before moving to Frith Street in Soho, where he opened his eponymous restaurant, as it was always known, which was, the size of this.
Wow.
Very modest in scale, impeccably designed, though. Absolutely beautiful. And again, polished, shiny floorboards, very Danish in its approach, black wooden tables and chairs, so chic and so stylish. And menus written lunch and dinner every day, beautifully designed, illustrated by Brian Mycee, this wonderful architect who was a great friend of Alastair's. And, they were printed every day. I mean, it was an amazing production in this very small restaurant. And beautiful. And the food that came out of it was, he, I think, probably is the one who ignited the fervour that was to become this Italian renaissance in cooking in Britain. Definitely. And because there was at the same time as Giorgio Locatelli was just appearing, the River Cafe was just appearing, and so all this was going on. I do think if Alastair hadn't done what he'd done, I wonder if it had quite got the reception it would have had.
How did he? Because again, I like a bit like Sir Terence. I like people who can, through their brute force or personality or storytelling, can create this sort of kind of earthquake of change, positive change. Like how would he do that? Like,
it's a great question, because I think a lot of it was learning on the way, learning on the cuff. Folk adored him, and one of the great beguiling factors to the restaurant business is that the food community is somewhere where you meet amazing people that you would not normally meet if you were a customer at a table. But if you prove your mettle as a cook, my goodness, the world goes berserk. I mean, and as Fergus Henderson would say, the power of chef. It's unreal. Folk people open doors for you. It's bizarre. I've never understood it, and never will. Never will get to grips with it. But it is an amazing fact. And Alastair dazzled. And when he opened Frith Street, he was the first hot chef. He graced the cover of Elle. The first edition of British Elle had Alastair Little on the cover.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
You don't get that if you're not.
So he started the sort of the rock starification of.
Yeah. Oh, but he wrote the rule book, and super. But with such style and panache and chic, and that's what I really liked. And he wore it so lightly. And if it was, a pasty, if it was a bowl of chickpeas and pasta and seafood, which would be on the menu, would be zuppa di ceci e pesci, I think. Something, I can't quite remember what it was. Anyway, but this unbelievable bowl of deliciousness would appear for you. The smells you couldn't believe, because the produce was so good.
Wow.
And the olive oil was always exceptional. The parmesan was the best. And so the soups alone were just knockout. And you felt you just sat down and there would be Marcella Hazan opening up a book in front of you. Like, this is unbelievably brilliant. Because one of the things that was very important to remember about not only was the wealth of restaurants opening and this whole new talent emerging, but there were also these producers who were suddenly inspired to bring ingredients in that we'd never had access to before. So they were finding all these amazing pulses and ingredients in Italy and in Spain. Monica Bendiza bringing over the hams and anchovies from Spain, which that we'll never forget. She should be sainted, basically.
Really, yeah.
I think she is. I think it's Saint Monica.
Yeah.
Definitely. And make her Pope. She's she's an amazing human being. She'd make a superb Pope.
Amazing.
And hilarious. And talk about blessed are the cheesemakers. She'll devil the smallest little producer, and do all the paperwork for them, to make sure it's all done just so the produce won't get stuck at the borders. That we've made.
How would Alastair sort of lead? And what's he important about?
Well,
I think that's I love leading. I think humour and leadership is a gorgeous.
Oh, he was.
That's so hard to do, but how did he do that?
There was an interesting one he threw out one day. Like, it wouldn't matter a whit to him if the person involved was the biggest talent he'd ever encountered. If they were a wanker, they were not in the light. He wouldn't have them in the kitchen.
Wow.
I mean, I think it was really quite, his philosophy was really quite simple. Well, I just want to work with good folk who are good at what they do and love what they do and enjoy what they do. And none of it's easy. I mean, it certainly wasn't making, I mean, Mullen said to me, I said he made a big stick to beat his own back with. But that said, it was always a
stick
joy.
To beat his own back as a...
Well, because, that was the norm. I mean, most kitchens are really quite ferocious still. I mean, the huge steps made in the last 20 years are incredible. And I mean, kitchens, a lot of kitchens are unrecognisable from what their counterparts.
Yeah, so how was, because you started as sort of right when we started our sort of conversation story in the kind of the kitchen that was called you by name. When you went into these sort of more, sort of, as you said, ferocious kitchens, more aggressive kitchens, like what was that experience like for you?
Well, amazingly, and this is a very interesting one because it's similar. I somehow gravitated to, without giving it much thought, I think, towards kitchens where everyone had a name. I really wasn't interested in, and also were great. So it was great produce, good folk, great personalities, somewhere you would learn something every day. That was very important, and what became very apparent. And so I lucked out, and and I do. Otherwise, I'm not sure how you survive those things. And also, it's a career. You want to be working right the way through. I mean, you don't want to be a bright light going out by 21 and exploding at 25. What's the fun in that?
Yeah.
And you're going to work your socks off. You want to think, no, I've done my time. I've studied. I've graduated. Now I'm going to get a job. Now I'm going to start working. Now I'm going to, and I'm going to work towards getting my own practice or my own kitchen or my own restaurant, something. You should be on the road and it should be going somewhere and it needs to progress along the way, and you want that road to go. Now, as you go along the road, you're like, oh, well, I wouldn't mind a cushion. It's quite nice to sit on this wooden chair with a cushion. I'd be more comfortable. Well, do you know what about having a curtain up here on this window? Should we put a curtain up here? That'd be quite nice, isn't it? And you just sort of bit by bit make this, this journey more, padded.
Yes. I need to run to the toilet because I'm absolutely dying. I'm absolutely loving this. We'll get on to QV in a sec.
Oh, lovely. I'd love a glass of that water if it's still going on, darling.
Yeah, it's very conversational. As I say, it just sort of jumps around. Because I think otherwise you've got to sort of let... I believe curiosity is like this kind of weird, wonderful thing, isn't it?
Yes.
It kind of let it into the room and just let it take you, almost like a tornado.
It is really interesting. I know you're like, gosh, oh God, where's this one going? Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's quite good.
Sorry, my bladder faculty sort of erode after about an hour in, so...
Don't worry, darling.
But yeah, sorry, so we're Alastair Little, his genius, and we were talking about how he... how he used humour to lead, I think is what we were.
Well, you could see it in his menus. There was wit.
Right, how would he add wit to the menus?
So the menus, they were always quite terse in their volume, so it would just be, there would be Zuppa and terrine. So the structure was always vital. He was very impressed by vital. And he always had cookery books in the kitchen as well. You were always encouraged to read. And... and I just think the other thing is, if you're going to spend a long day in a kitchen, you don't want to be bored, and you don't want to be a drudge. And so he would always make it really, and he was like a live wire. He had such electricity and such a dynamic. And folk would come in constantly to see him. And he was just a magnet for everyone. And it was the great glory days of, the Magnifico restaurant reviewers like Jonathan Meads and Emily Green and Matthew Fort and Adrian Gill and Faye Mashler and these titans.
I love A.A. Gill's my favourite, one of my favourite writers.
They were titans.
I was reading. I've read everything. I mean, he's got that one essay which is like morning at the Ivy. And he talks about the machines in the kitchen being fat sumos, and I'm like, how can you describe something like that? Yeah. And it's just he's so... Did you ever come across him?
Yes.
What was he like? Because he
was amazing. Because hilariously, a billion years ago, when the wave, when the mood changed towards Terence Conran, and the mega restaurants started coming in, and everyone could see that it was completely unsustainable.
Such as...
Quaglino's, Metzel, Bluebird, a lot of them were by Terence.
Well, as when you said it wasn't sustainable, but like
because they were vast. I mean, London's not Paris. I mean, Paris can support La Coupole.
Right.
But even the great brasseries in Paris were floundering at that time.
Right.
The sheer scale of people you need to fill all these restaurants every day just didn't exist, or did but very rarely. And so I think they enjoyed exceptional success when they opened up because everyone was just amazed by them. But they're difficult beasts to manage. I mean, they're enormous. So I think and the tide turned, and Adrian, when I first met him, came to review the blueprint, and I was so green behind the ears as a head chef that I just thought, you can't go, recognise him. I didn't feel encouraged to go up and greet him, otherwise that'd be terrible. Of course, later on, I realised, well, of course you're supposed to. It's a great honour to have such a thing.
So what did you do when you...
Well, I just blushed and ran back in the kitchen and just went, oh God, and just put my band down like this one. And indeed, and that week we also had Faye Mashter came in. Both reviews sent us to the bottom of the pool of London. We were absolutely annihilated.
Really?
Yeah, we were obliterated. Well, not the food. I think they liked the food fine, but it was the beginning of Terence bashing. Like, why are all these restaurants being made so much bigger? Why are all these big restaurants suddenly coming into our world? We're not Paris, we're not New York, we don't understand this culture. And so that was mostly what the beef was about.
Right.
But the fallout was pretty sensational. And we went, oh, it's over, my career is done, that's it, I should go home now.
What does it feel like when you get one of those reviews?
Oh my God, it's devastating. I mean, I was in floods of tears and had to be frisked off home, destroyed, and then woke up the next morning, and of course it is tomorrow's fish and chips, and nobody batted an eyelid.
Yeah.
Awful. And I think folk were fond of us anyway. They quite liked what we were doing at the Blueprint, and of course we got it wrong. Quite not too often, because kitchens, I was a foundling. I was just, I was a fledgling still. I hadn't really quite found my voice. I wasn't quite sure. We were still, I hate these terms like modern European and modern British, but it was a bit like that. We were trying out stuff, which Terence was very generous about letting us do. And all good folk should be generous about that. But you've got to have your finger, you've got to be there. Yeah. You can't take your eye off that. And so there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
That was that. But then years later at Quo Vadis, he couldn't have been sweeter, kinder, and more generous and more supportive.
What was he like what was he personally like? Did you have much interaction with him?
Oh, he was the most elegant and sophisticated of folk. Very erudite. Incredibly, I was impeccably dressed and impeccably groomed, and very funny and very naughty and very charming.
Yeah, his
impeccably charming and could hold a table like no one else.
I can't. Yeah, because he'd passed away when I first started reading.
Oh,
I discovered him. So that I think I first read. I read Poor Me, which is his autobiography, which is P-O-U-R.
Yeah.
And it obviously had the A.A. Gill was... it's so good. But the way he strings sentences together, a bit like the poetry style of things.
Yeah, no,
you're reading something, you're like, wow.
And the fact that he was so dyslexic and they all had to be taped.
Yeah, that's because he spoke
dictate over the phone.
Dictators into it, yeah. And then he... Yeah, it's mad. In terms of the fuck up stuff, I believe I was listening to this really good podcast the other day with this creative. He's a director, Robert Rodriguez, who did. He does really fucking off the wall films, but they're I like it when people just do their own style. Oh my God, they're escaping me. But one of the things he was saying is you've got to study the ashes of your failure, because that's where
the roses of success grow from.
So what about So how do you sort of use fuck ups? As to become more.
What is terrible is if you have a terrible service, let's say, for example, it just all goes down the sink. And it happens. And there's that table, there was always going to be a table of two. Whatever goes on there, it's a disaster. Void just one up, you have to go void the whole thing, just pour champagne down their throat, because they actually hate us now. And they're going to poison everyone in their vicinity in the dining room. So rule number one you learn is accept your failures. put your hands up and go, what can we do to please you? Because we're only as good as our team, and we need our customers. Going off on a tantrum because, it's not working, never did anything for anyone. I think kitchens have grown up enormously on that front as well. And I think own your mistakes. And I think the thing is, when you do Groundhog Day, then there's a big problem somewhere.
Right. Was there a specific example of that?
I would just say if you don't, I don't know about an example, but I would certainly say if you don't analyse what the problem is and how the problem arose, just so you know to look out for it the next time. You're like, look, we did that, but we can never do that again. I think it's a very, very, very sound mantra, and you learn from that. Whereas if it's just, if it's a lackadaisical, oh, well, that didn't go very well. You just think, oh, no, that did not go very well. That went very badly.
Right.
And we think you might have done something to encourage that.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
That's hilarious. The moving on to QV then. One thing I've
welcome.
So is it John Broadley?
Yes.
Or Broadley. Broadley. Yeah. His illustrations on the menu are of like they to me. And we talked a lot about sort of stories and fiction, and almost like the fiction of food. Like when I read that or look at the menu, it has the sort of illustrations of like a fairy tale and like a kid's book, and it like adds this sort of spellbinding enchantment and excitement to like tucking in.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, but I'd love to know like what was the process of working with maybe Eddie and Sam. Like, how did that come to be?
Oh, God, it's a lovely journey.
Create that because it's so iconic now, but like.
Oh God, it was amazing. Well, it was a very, very strange time, and I'd hugely underestimated what leaving 18 years at the Blueprint would feel like. Massively, I didn't.
What was the most shocking thing?
Well, it was just a huge change.
Yeah.
Imagine like an 18-year-old going out into the world for the first time. There was a touch of that.
Yeah.
And into this gargantuan building in the middle of Soho, and I was used to this gentle little room on the gentle lapping waters of the Pool of London on the south bank of the River Thames.
Had your market there.
I'd sack around by a bag of apricots and elderflowers, it's charming. And suddenly I'm in this ferocious wild building, that was just teeming with its extraordinary history. And Sam and I and Eddie needed to get to know each other. And so one of the things was I said, well, look, I'm not coming in to rip off all you've done beforehand. That's just silly. That's not what this is about. We're partners. Or were then anyway. And then what came through was the menu that the boys had created for the first manifestation of Quo Vadis, which was so beautiful. I mean, it was like eating in the Orient Express. I mean, the detail and lavishness was just,
What was on the menu, like?
Oh God, it was a wonderful thing. I think what was interesting with Philippe was the chef then, that he was French and just couldn't understand what British food was. And indeed, few did at the time, really, because it was just emerging still. And so it was really good produce. But the world had changed, when we were in turmoil again, not for the first time, certainly not for the last time. And so I said, look, it was an unfortunate set of circumstances. So we should celebrate what was good. And one of the really good things we could preserve was this big card of a menu. And so I started penning up thoughts and ideas for this. And the boxes came naturally, because that's classic brasserie, bistro look. And then with Julian Roberts, who is a very dear friend, and we'd met through Priscilla Carluccio way back in the day. So there's even more threads go through it all. And I said, do you know what? There's room here for an illustration. And Julian looked up like this and went, oh, can we do that? And I went...
Sorry, Julian in this... Sorry.
So Julian Roberts, so the 3 J's in this are... So 3 J's is the moniker for Dundee, Jam and Journalism. 3 J's for the menus at Quo Vadis are Jeremy, John and Julian. And Julian Roberts is a brilliant graphic designer who did all the graphics for Carluccio's and probably almost every Italian packaging you can think of. He's probably, been there, working his magic. Genius. And he said, oh, wow, if it's an illustration you want, I think I've got just the man for you. I've been wanting to work with him forever. And it was John Broadley.
Yep.
And so the first menus we did were very Spartan, very plain. It's quite Presbyterian looking at them now compared to what they are now. And they were slightly smaller format. And the illustrations then were much more redolent of Bourdain, Edward Bourdain and Revilius. You know, those 30s, 40s, 50s illustrators. Amazing. Very simple, very simplistic. And almost just naive and childlike as well in their simplicity. And then over the time, we started working on, well, you know, let's do the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang one, let's do the Wind in the Willows menu, let's do an Alice in Wonderland. Because we were mad about children's books and illustration. And we were obsessed with illustration.
Yeah. Why were you so obsessed with it, and how did that link to the experience you were trying to create with the customer?
It was really, because the thing is, if you looked at John's work, some of it's really dark, and like, what am I? You think you're going to meet this wild goth, and you meet this charming, ruddy-cheeked little blonde, charming, jovial chap, who looked perfectly at home on a tractor, tilling a field. You're like, wow, I mean, how does this work? Yeah. This is incredible. And so it's a very lovely, charming, group of folk that all came together to work on these menus. And then over time, there was a thing when Sam did the big overhaul of the first floor of the club, and we put a dining room in there. And I said, do you know what? There's a wall there. We could put a Soho tapestry up. And Soho tapestries were made, because St Giles's, believe it or not, just around the corner, had a great big tapestry factory, which eventually went down to Mortlake. And there were made those gargantuan tapestries that went up in the huge houses that were being built, in the 16th and 17th and 18th and 19th centuries. And as folk, well, there's not very many of those left, shall we just say, if you've got a tapestry, they sold it a long time ago. They are worth a fortune. But apparently you could still get scraps. People would cut, bits off it. So we're like, maybe we could get bits off, And then Julian just said, well, John could do. And I went, he said we could do a Bayeux tapestry of Soho. And so that's what graces the wall on the first floor. It's 400 years of Soho history.
Oh, so what's some of the little... What's it punctuated with?
Yeah, name it. I mean, you should be able to recognise it. We often joke that if anyone can identify all the characters walking the streets of Soho. So the perspectives are all slightly warped and strange. So it all looks like it comes from Old Compton Street and going up, but it's the whole of Soho behind it. It's really fascinatingly conceived and beautifully executed. Wow. And when you see the originals that he does, I mean, the detail it's incredible. He is mind-blowing.
And how does that, from the kind of customer's experience? Because I interviewed Osh at Devonshire, who's an amazing character.
He's an extraordinary man. But great neighbour.
He says, we're in the business of, the way he describes hospitality is, we're in the business, we're selling a retail product, essentially, but our retail product is a feeling and a story, which then people take home, and their whole thing is, it's not value for money, it's value for time, it's the time spent here, or so I'll go and tell my friends about the menus or the buffet rolls, but what's the story you want people to kind of share, when they leave here, and how do you sort of think about that?
It's so interesting. I mean, I think for me it's even simple. I mean, I think folk it's an adventure. It's a journey. When you make a reservation, it's no different to booking a train ticket or a plane ticket, and you're immediately bought into my expectations are this.
How so?
And so it should be you should be greeted gently and kindly and generously. Sat down immediately, offered water, bread and butter. There's just this gentle journey you go on, and each step is impeccable. That's the goal we want to achieve. And along the way, these folk will be so settled and comfortable that they might have some time to actually look up from the menu or the table and actually have a look around and see where they're sitting and and feel they are in the right place.
Yes.
And that they've made the right decision, and this is exactly the journey they wanted to go on. And all along the way, they're thinking, good, so far so good. This is excellent and wonderful, thank you. And if that's your first time, hopefully we will have done a job to a degree that will encourage you to come back again. Because I'm particularly a bit an old darling like Quo Vadis relies absolutely on folk coming back time and again. You know, and I mean it's an awful expression, repeat business. Sounds like you're going to burp or something. Terrible. Yeah. Those are going to repeat on me. Oh, I know. But, you know, when you see names constantly, you know, popping up again and again on the booking sheets, you go, oh, that's... Well, we love them. Make sure they get a glass of champagne. You know?
I know that it can sometimes sound a bit sort of like wanky and nausy, but like the adventure through food or the journey through food and stuff. But like, how do you think about food as kind of being the compass through that journey, and like how do you
it's vital, you know. I mean, it's like putting on a great shirt, you know, and you know when you sit down to dinner, it's like just you're taking a shirt out of a box and taking the wrapping off and taking the pins out in the collar, and you go, and you can't help but feel, oh, that is quite good, it fits nicely, you know. And when it's right, it's the best feeling in the world. And what's been, you can see it in the staff, you can see it in the crew, it's reflected in the kitchen, it's reflected on the food. You know, because a happy kitchen makes happy food, I think. A happy crew creates happy service, you know, just imbues the building. And that we absolutely love. And if there's one, and it's probably our mantra and driving force throughout the whole building, that it's, you know, it's a pleasure. You know, none of it's easy, and it's bloody difficult. And, you know, and we're... You know, it's strange times we live in. That is for sure, but not for the first time, and I doubt it'll be for the last time. You know, and it's annoying that it's happened again. You know, and
when you say it's strange,
I just think the finances of restaurants are unhinged. I just think we are being squeezed. I don't know why. You know, Sam Hart made a brilliant observation. He said, look, you know, Paris 20 years ago was the epicenter of the world. And it just goes to show that it's very fragile, what we do. It's ephemeral. You know, and much as one would like to liken what, you know, opening up a bag of, you know, a new garment, the problem is you get to keep a garment. You know, with food, it's ephemeral. It's for the moment. And so there's that old maxim, you're only good as your last meal. And it's this hilarious thing, you know, we like to think, people might think what we do is keep it simple and it's quite simple fare. Wow.
Yeah,
not so much.
How's it complicated that people won't see?
Well, Sean Hill put it absolutely beautifully years and years ago at when he first took over the Walnut Tree. He went, yeah, folk like to think what we do is really simple food, but he said it's funny, it takes 8 of us all day, every day to do it. And we have got to pay our suppliers, just saying.
That's such a good way of putting it.
Isn't it lovely? I thought that was absolutely brilliant. Very astute. He's very clever.
It is so, yeah, it's also...
He's an amazing man.
Talk to me about him. What's he taught you?
Well, I never worked with him. I've worked with people who have worked with him. I've known him. He's been in my life because, you know, Jason Lowe...
Just for listeners...
Yes, Sean Hill was, when Rick Stein was starting in Padstow in Cornwall, Sean Hill was the head chef of our very famous hotel in Kent, I think it is, Gidley Park, and was one of the very original new generation of what were then called the Great British Chefs.
Yep.
And so there was Gary Rhodes and Rick Stein and Simon Hopkinson and Alastair Little and Sean Hill was in there too, you know. An impeccable cook. Wonderful food. You know, and I think, you know, introduced a lightness and touch and feel for cooking. It was very singular. It's very lovely.
Very singular.
Well, because it's very hard to carve out your own voice in a very loud world. And he did just that. You know, he would take dishes that were so familiar, you know, a fish stew, for example, say a burrito or something like that, and it would be the best burrito you ever had in your life.
Wow.
And the aglio would be punched into the middle of next week, and the broth would be sensational, and the fish would be off the charts fresh. And you just have those 3 things on a plate were just superb. So it's really interesting.
It's interesting what we were saying at the beginning, like the cross section of things of like sort of fiction and books being like the synchronicity between fiction and food almost. It's like books, portable magic. I think like when you eat a dish, and as you say, it's like that. It's very in the moment, but it can be almost like as I know this is a fucking word, but like teleportative. You know, like transportative.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Like it has that ability just to take you to this other thing.
Absolutely.
But you're still telling stories, and then that story will then be passed on.
Yes, like and also think dishes that strike a chord and they just spark a memory. Like, oh God, I remember eating something like this when we were in Marseille, or we were in the south of France once and we ate a dish. Like, wow, this is amazing. Because holiday food famously never travels. You never even do it. And so I think it was quite a big step when dishes that are so famous were being practiced. I'm famous abroad. I'm being practiced near a home. Or were being done impeccably. Was a massive different. That was a very big step being taken.
Let's talk about pudding, because I think the difference between pudding and dessert is slight but also massive at the same time. What sort of restaurants do you think do really good puddings in London?
Oh my goodness!
Other than this place.
Well, St John always did impeccable puddings.
Yeah.
And Rochelle Canteen, Fergus Margot, I always loved their. I love their puddings. There's Max's very naughty deep fried bread and butter pudding at Cafe Cecilia, of course. I'll tell you who's got really good puddings. Morcella on just around the corner from Exmouth Market.
Right.
I had really good pudding there recently.
What pudding was it?
It was a delicious cake steeped in syrup. It was for dinner for create funds to send to Palestine. And I'm trying to remember who the pastry cook was. It's very embarrassing. I don't know. I know it's a she. That I do know. But it was absolutely stunning. I think it was a ricotta and almond cake, if I remember rightly. Beautiful. It was such a lovely recipe. River Cafe, a plate of ice creams there, magnificent. And all their cakes, really. Cafe Deco, Anna always makes beautiful puddings. I always love what she does. She's got such a lovely touch, Anna. And oh God, on and on and on. I mean, Spring, Sky's puddings are amazing. Beautiful ice creams. Petersham or Heckfield. Not Petersham, Spring or Heckfield are fantastic. God, the list is, just amazing.
The puddings we interviewed. Have you been to the 9th in Fitzrovia?
Not yet, and want to go.
They do like this. I've been there twice, but they do this
lucky you.
bread and butter pudding thing. I don't know what it's fucking orgasmic. It's insanely delicious, and it's just like you have.
You just think bread. It's just bread, custard, fruit. How can it not be delicious?
So good. How do you think about pudding in sort of the journey of the story?
Well, I think one of the things that I think when there's a formative moment many, many, many years ago, and it was one of the very first times I'd ever cooked in a kitchen in Italy. And I grabbed an olive oil bottle full of olive oil. I went glug, 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 with this. And there was this outraged gasp from my host at the table. I went, and this was in Tuscany. They're like, God, and I said, but I'm in Italy, and don't you put loads of oil in? And he went, certainly not. You uncouth lout. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, wow. All the myths ever, in a nutshell, exploded. And I went, that's incredible. And so I thought, wow, that is really interesting. So I said, how does that translate back home? And so bit by bit over the years, and it was also fueled by, the introduction of all these dietaries that we suddenly had to start dealing with. And there were vegetarians and vegans, and they would get very upset if they felt they were being fobbed off with a beetroot and goat's cheese salad again. And so it was beholden to the kitchens to get creative. And so bit by bit, by default, we started removing butter and cream to a great part. I mean, of course, it still appeared, but less and less. And amazingly, we didn't notice that, and olive oil came more and more and more to the fore. So we do have generally 3 olive oils on the go.
Right, yeah.
So it's always been like that. 3! And I'm like, yes, just shut up. And that's what we do. Just ignore it. And we make it work. Because it's all about produce. And so more and more and more, the menu itself, so all the bites and starters and main courses and sides for the most part, are fundamentally made of vegetable and olive oil to the fore, and then whatever, meat and fish might come into there. So that when it comes to pudding, we can pour in the cream and ice cream and custard and Jersey cream and clotted cream and any other cream you can lay our hands on, creme fraiche sometimes, because we quite like that. And so it can all, so that's where we can go glug, 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 glug.
Amazing.
But never on a salad. That's just vulgar, and to cook with is outrageous. I learned a lot from that. So I think that's the journey we put there, so that, puddings, you're guaranteed, because it's also the thing, we're in Soho. I mean, what is going to get you off a couch in Hackney when you can pop down the road to wonderful things? There's Dalston, Stoke Newington, there's everything is, and Hackney Wick and there's Stratford, and there's all sorts of stuff going on all over the place. What would bring you into Soho? And we just said, wonderful puddings.
So that's mad. So almost like the puddings. You think the puddings are almost the main event then with what?
Not the main event, but
it's the magnet.
The guarantee. But we would like to think we will spoil you rotten when it comes to a pudding, and it's worth the effort, and it's worth ordering rather than just.
What's the hardest pudding to make? Do you think? Because I think there's there's a book called The War of Art, which is all about the creative process. And I feel like sometimes creativity, there's a war in creativity, and he talks about this thing called resistance. And he talks about resistance. Stephen Pressfield. It's aimed at writers, but it's applicable to anyone in the creative worlds. And he says sometimes if you on the other side of resistance is the beauty, is the thing.
So true.
Which pudding has had the most resistance? If that's maybe a way
amazingly, none.
As in the one, not resistance from customers, resistance for you to make.
Oh, God.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no, we've never... The chocolate tart that doesn't set, when you need to be Willy Wonka to make that. And that thing, because it comes out of the oven at, say, 5 to 12. Lovely wobble, perfect, glistening, dark. 12:30, it's cooled a bit, and you're like, what's going on there? It's kind of gone, it's got markings, Yeah. 1 o'clock, you're like, oh God, it's set. 1:30, the first slice comes out, and you're like, oh God, that should have been at 5 to 12. So it's very funny. So I just said, oh, fuck it. I'm not, we've got lots of delicious chocolate things. Let's not do a chocolate. And the custard tart is all right. But there's a lot when we had to work it out. Once, if you made it in the morning, would it be as good in the evening? So what you were serving at 1:30, would that be as good to a table sitting at 5, 5:30? And it's eating at 6:30. So we had to work all those out to see what would stand the test of time.
Yeah.
So our profiteroles I'm baked almost every hour.
They've got that sort of chocolate glistening. It's glittering.
It's
unbelievable.
Very velenotic and a very, very thin, crisp shell. And amazingly, we fell out of love with crackling almost as quickly as we fell in love with it. We didn't
out of love with
that crackling thing when people put that mosaic thing on top of profiteroles. And we just said, we had to shoot, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. So we really shouldn't be doing this. But we thought, well, give it a whirl. Let's see what it looks like. And didn't like it, And so you're right. We're resistant. We're resistant to change for change's sake. But all recipes change over time. It's bizarre.
It's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when we are forced to change. So, for example, none of us, not one person in the kitchen could bake a creme caramel. And 2 or 1, we could all say, but we all cooked creme caramels wherever we'd cooked before and never thought about it. They all came out like a treat. And suddenly we were deviled by eggs, and all our custard, creme brulees, creme caramels, all went to pot. I mean, what is this about? And it's taken, an almighty amount of thought and working out, literally down to the last gram of an egg yolk to work out what the recipe is. Now I'm like, something's changed, Something really has changed. This is absolutely nuts, and I don't get it at all. But the journey, it was very fun. We had a lot of laughs doing it.
Yeah.
And I had to look at a lot of collapsed creme caramels and just go...
How did you find... That's one thing I was trying to get to, because you've clearly got your very like steadfast sort of style in the way you do things, like not even just in the kitchen, like just you as a sort of a person. Like you've worked under sort of Terence, Alastair Little, obviously sort of Sam and Eddie here. Like how did you forge your own sort of style and uniqueness?
Well, I'll tell you, that is an interesting, because I really didn't set out to create anything at all. And I lucked out. I came from a very boisterous family. You know, if you wanted to be heard, you had to shout.
Yep.
And I was drawn to big personalities, and so you don't have to worry about imposing yourself on them. You've just got to, march up with it. So I've never had anything imposed on me. It's really it's interesting. I've not really analysed it particularly, but I did think there was a pattern of I really liked fascinating, brilliant, very stylish, very clever, very talented people. And I lucked out enormously, and to this day I don't know how in the hell I did it, working with such over a very long period of time. And it all seeped in, and it also sat beautifully with how I'd been brought up by mum and dad, and my siblings. Because it was just, effortless style. They just had good. It was very natural.
Take us into your home in Dundee. What did it look like? What was on the walls? What were the colours?
Oh God! Well, it was a modern house because mum and dad couldn't afford. There was amazing architecture in Dundee. Not a lot else, but there is amazing architecture. And they couldn't quite afford a big stone Georgian, which is what they wanted. And so what they could do, though, was move 9 miles outside to a small village and buy a plot of land and build a great big block of cheese, to all intents and purposes. So it was a modern 60s, Eames, Danish-esque style, very simple, very plain, huge windows, overlooking just, a wheat field at the time.
Wow.
It was really lovely. And over time, Dad created an amazing garden with rocks and pools and terraces, and it's wildly overgrown now, of course, because we're orphans, and we've still got it. But it's crazy. It's like the secret garden. It's quite good fun there. And they were very good at marrying old and new. They had a great eye for antiques there, so they would marry, Habitat dining chairs based on an old Magistrati sign, with a great big old knackered Victorian sofa and little wine tables. And they just had a very natural, easy, intuitive, instinctive way of putting things together that was very lovely. And so when I walked into the Conran shop for the first time, I was feeling like, oh, I know this. I recognise this.
Yes.
It seemed very natural. And indeed, when you walked into, any of my friends' homes, it was like, oh, and so there was a thought. All the thoughts were similar. It was really interesting.
It's like, I love that. It's like all the sort of boisterous and kind of esoteric household. Then you meet all these wonderful characters. Who are some of the most unusual people you've met?
Oh gosh. I mean, well, one of the great things. Somebody once asked, there was a David Chipperfield show at the Blueprint. And
David Chipperfield,
the architect, very eminent architect.
Yeah.
And there was a great retrospective of his work, and I think it was the days under Alice Rockstar. I can't quite remember. I think Alice was, heading up the game at the time. And somebody came on and said, "Oh God, David is." There was a huge dinner after the opening show, and we did a lot of those. And so one of the things that came out, and said, "Oh, can you get me a table?" So I said, and I'd been invited to sit down at a table to have dinner, which I didn't always do. I always prefer being backstage, but in this instance I did because it was a very special evening. And so getting up in the middle of all this great hoo-ha and just going, "Find me a table now."
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to say. I was like, okay, that's how it's done. And one of the amazing things with restaurants and the food community is if you kick your heels around the business long enough, it is amazing who you will feed. And then having fed them maybe, or their parents, or even their grandparents, or their kids, and it goes into generational, that's lovely. But over a long period of time, it will be amazing who you will find you have fed. And then there will come a time where you might be at something, I don't know, an awards ceremony or a great gathering to celebrate someone or something, and you bump into someone and bang, you're off down another rabbit hole.
Wow.
You know, and so I've met and cooked for a lot of folk over the years. It's fantastic and great fun. I would no more presume friendship. But there's a lot I've, became great chums with and eaten with and what have you. But I'm not going to give you any names because that would be vulgar.
No, yeah, not. I don't mean. Yeah,
I would never do that.
Yeah, no.
Do I look like Nigel Dempster?
Yeah. No, it was more sort of unusual conversations, especially around here, because I think you can just in terms of melting
absolutely.
pot of like different people. A couple more things, then we'll begin to wrap this up. I'm absolutely loving this, mate. But want to go back to Fergus because what he's done is just so astounding with St. John and how he sort of entered the zeitgeist. But like, you're friends with him. Like, describe when you first met and like what are some of the lessons you've picked up from him? It could be, doesn't have to be up.
Oh, the wonderful thing. I know there's many wonderful things about Fergus Henderson. Chief among them was my friendship because I just adore the man, and then I think he's.
When did you first meet?
So we met properly first when I left Alastair Little and I opened I was the head chef. It was my first head chef's gig at a tiny little restaurant on Upper Street in Islington called Euphorium. And it went off like a rocket. Amazing. I'm not surprised. It was the size of this table. It was teensy. Very funny. It was very funny, very silly, very sweet. Totally unsustainable. But, hey-ho. It was an immensely important work-wise because it catapulted me into another realm. And so we were closed every lunch. And so at lunchtime, we would gather, Marwan and myself, we would go to St. John for lunch because my friend Dan Leppard was doing the bread then, the great baker. And we would go out by our bed.
Name's Dan Leppard.
Dan Leppard.
That's an amazing name.
And he's an amazing baker. And also we'd cook together at Alastair Little.
Right, with you.
So, so it was, lovely, again, these amazing threads that go through all we do. And so I used to go down there and buy bread from him. And then Fergus almost always had, not back then, but very often had lunch in the dry. But he was on the pass. And so, it just sparked off. And then we had lots of friends in common. And bit by bit, very naturally and exponentially and charmingly, we just gravitated there. And then when I left, and I wasn't at Euphorium for very long, because when Terence came and offered me the blueprint then, because it had become vacant, and then, and I got catapulted into a realm, and suddenly, there we were side by side, and it's a natural way, it was a very sweet natural way, Margaret, and then this whole, they all became, very quickly best friends.
Wow. And what's he taught you about, like, because I think he's got his so unique kind of way of doing things.
Oh, his amazing assurance that this was the right way to do it. It's one of the things.
Even because what Margot was saying to me is back then everyone was like, this is mental. Like, this it's almost the steadfastness when the Zephyrs of like...
Oh, God, no, everyone. I think what's interesting, critically, he was incredibly well received. I think this is very important to remember about St. John and the fact that the restaurant actually did not enjoy a first flush of success for a long time. And the critics loved it, and the artists loved it, but the public were completely bamboozled because they would be offered, instead of, like a grand aioli would be this elaborate pantheon of all the vegetables in this elaborate dish. Fergus said, oh no, just give them a boiled egg and a carrot and a bowl of aioli. There you go. Mini aioli. And folk just couldn't get it. They didn't know what on earth this was. And the fronds would still be on. Now the fronds will be, the peelings and the fronds and the tips will all be in a pesto. They will go on that one. Mm-hmm. But back then, it was unheard of.
Yeah, and how did he get people to sort of buy into it? Or what was the...
I think it's fair to say, I think Anthony Bourdain was the one that turned the game around for them, I think.
Right.
They met, because Fergus was being feted. I mean, this is the thing, he was being feted the world over by this stage. And the art world had taken him absolutely to their bosom.
Because
he was just so bloody chic and stylish and brilliant and funny. And, had grown up in this. I mean, he's a London blue blood and had grown up in this world. Mm-hmm. So knew lots of folk. And it was just a very nice... And of course, he'd been doing supper clubs and all sorts forever beforehand, you know, and had worked with Christina Smith in the basement of Smith's restaurant and done these huge Sunday lunches that were legendary. I mean, he himself was a legend before he even opened St. John. I mean, I think that's fair to say. And then I think the restaurant-wise, puzzle. You know, people didn't understand getting a whole shoulders of lamb back then. These were unheard-of dishes. You know, it was like, what is all this? You know, we're all about fillet steak and prime cuts and lamb rack. And he's like, no, you'll get a whole, all dressed salads. We don't build them, you know, and all this kind of thing. It was incredible. You know, and their impact was absolutely huge. And then when I think Anthony Bourdain descended, fell madly in love with Fergus and St. John, and wrote about it, and literally it went off like it was almost vertical.
Wow.
It was amazing.
Did you ever meet Bourdain?
Yes.
What was that?
I loved him. Well, the first time I met him was at a dinner at the Groucho with Fergus, and I've never met anyone more erudite and charming. He was absolutely
really.
The eyes twinkled. You were like, wow, you know. I mean, a very impressive presence.
Yeah, he's. I mean, he
was genial, just so genial. And in fact, the last time I saw him, he was actually having dinner bizarrely with Adrian Gill at Quo Vadis.
Really?
And these two impeccably dressed darlings walked through the door, and we were all like, oh God, wow. When that was a dining room, that was one hell of a night.
Really?
It
Talk me
star-studded.
through that night. Because those two are like, for me, starting this.
Well, they were having dinner together.
A.A. Gill were like two of my biggest heroes. Like,
I know, it was amazing. No, they were having dinner together. Neither of them were with us. I don't think they were here even a year later. But it was the last time I saw them.
A.A. Gill was 2016 and then Bourdain was 2018. It was like...
Yeah, it was a very short period of time. He was just gracious, charming and lovely, and it was a very special memory. You know, and the room was electric. Everyone just followed them like that. Wow.
Yeah. Did you speak to them that night? Or?
Yeah, I know, because when a building like this, it's imperative that you walk it.
Well, yeah, because I've seen that, because we've eaten here, like, before I even met Sam, quite a few. We had a mate who was over from New York, and we were.
Oh wow!
This must have been.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, a couple of years ago, probably like a year, about 18 months ago. I came here for my birthday 2 years ago. Well, I rocked up fucking drunk, to be honest.
Well done.
But I was I was sat down there having a fag, and like just getting bucket loads of chips down by my friends. But one thing I have noticed is you have this commandeering kind of you sort of carouse and careen through the room. Like, how important is that to get things? Why do you do that?
Well, that was a lesson Alastair told me, because when you pop up to see a pal, you know, and very sweetly, there's a lot of pals come to eat here. The table next door might have been, you know, going, didn't speak to me. And so I just thought, well, I certainly don't walk the tables, that's for sure. I mean, I got, you know, certainly not, and, you know, but I just think to be a presence is quite nice. So I just walk through the building, you know, every now and again, just to keep an eye on things and what have you. It's interesting, you know, and also because, you know, we might have a very young front of house staff on that night, and they might not be anything as old as I am and recognise folk and, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so it's quite nice to keep an eye on things.
Yeah.
You know?
Have you ever had, what's been some of the hardest days or the lonely days in this journey of yours?
Oh God! You know, they fall off the bottom of the page. Lots. Oh my God! It's not a gilded business at all. But anything good is not gilded. You know, I mean, you ask a lawyer, you know, or a nurse, or you know, a nurse has been on a 48-hour shift at A&E at the weekend. I think anything you care about, anything you enjoy, will come with good days and bad days. There's always a flip side to everything, and. Golly, I mean, for sure there have been days when you went, what the fuck is this? And why am I doing it? But, you know, tomorrow's another day. Tomorrow's always another day. And I think
what are some of those days if they blossom to your mind?
No, you block them from memory. I mean, I think the thing that, like pain, you can never remember it. You know, and I think it's very important to do that. Never look back. Learn from behind, that's for sure. Learn from things past. And, you know, be aware of where things went and what won't do. And it's not rose-tinted glasses, but I think carrying negative energy is really bad, period. Yeah. So you want to exercise as much of that as possible because, you know, there's always going to be bad shit to deal with.
How did you do that? And I ask all these questions selfishly.
No, I've got no idea. I think it just came naturally with age and experience, probably.
Yeah.
And having really good friends.
Yeah.
I think it was very, very key. And I think I lucked out in not only working with amazing people, but making great friends along the way who have remained very, very dear now for a very, very, very long period of time.
What's the genius of Eddie and Sam?
Impeccable eye for detail.
Right.
They have, they will know exactly how to, if you look at the original design of Barafino, and I loved Fino enormously. That was a great restaurant, and it's much missed. Their very first one, just off Charlotte Street. But Barafino, when you look at the complexity of this, the bars are quite big now. But the original bars were not as huge like that, and the complexity of what they had to put in place to make that all work with the kitchen and going live in front of them when their place rammed to the rafters is amazing. I mean, it's extraordinary. So I think being brought up in the business with parents with impeccable style as well, and then then they bring their take on that with the next generation. But I think it's their impeccable eye for detail and style, and they've got brilliant palettes. Absolutely, brilliant palettes. And that plate's empty and a tries. Oh, there's a big problem. And luckily, I've never seen a plate not been returned.
I want to finish where we started on books, because I love books. But like, what would you say are some of your favourite cookbooks? I don't know. And I know that's a massive question for you. But like, if you could like maybe distill it to maybe 4 or 5, just because and then actually some of your favourite books, like fiction or non-fiction.
Yes. God. Well, I still think. Oh God. Well, let's. Should we say authors?
Authors. Yeah.
5 authors who I think are seminal, and I think it's Elizabeth David, I would say Alice Waters, I would say David Tannis, Fergus Henderson, and then, do you know what I think about the River Cafe books? Ruth and Rose. I think they're amazing, they're brilliant. I can refer to them constantly because they're just great. And that's in no order, and that is off the cuff with so many others I could add to that list that just fall off the... Because that's why we did a photo in the book. It's why we just did a random photograph of the shelves.
Is that a picture in your home?
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, because I mean, yeah.
We'll get and it does look like that upstairs as well. It's just bloody ridiculous.
Yeah.
But they were going, list your 10 favourite books. I went, I hate these lists.
Yes.
They're a torture, and they always change.
Yeah.
So I said I could do that, and I was amazed they let me get away with that one.
Just take a picture, and then just some of your favourite.
Favourite authors.
Yeah, because I love I'll go and read them.
Well, I would say 19th century Russians. I love Chekhov and Gogol and Pushkin. Very, very much. Short stories I love from them. More modern things I love. Oh my God, I'm going to have an absolute brain collapse now. Anything by Jane Austen. It's usually gorgeous because she's such fun, and sometimes you need something like that. But I think Jane Austen, Nancy Mitford are brilliant. Love them very, very much indeed. Who else do I really, really like that I'm enjoying at the moment? What am I reading at the moment? Oh my God. Anything by Olivia Laing usually is brilliant. And she's now branching out into, she's just written her first book of fiction, which is the Silver, which is amazing. All about Cinecittà in the 50s, which is very, very exciting. And then Charlie Porter, I love. He's brilliant. But because there's been quite a lot of death in the family of recent, I couldn't finish his book. So I'm looking forward to finishing that enormously, because I think he's a really brilliantly, fascinatingly interesting writer. And I like his take from moving from becoming a fashion journalist into a very seasoned writer. I think is an amazing journey. And oh golly, so much more. I love Lessons in Chemistry. Thought that was just brilliant. Like that a lot. So no, it's quite expansive.
And you said you've had this death in the family recently. How are you dealing with that? Or how's that?
It's so catastrophically awful. But you have really got no alternative but to carry on, as tragic and awful as it is in the circumstances. And, you know, the one thing I would just say is I just wish these fuckers would stop blowing up the world and put some money into cancer treatment, please. Thank you very much. I think we'd all be a lot better off.
Let's wrap that up there. That's been an absolute joy of a way to spend an afternoon. I've absolutely loved it.
Thank you so much.